Good evening. I'd like to call this regular business meeting of the Loveland Board of Education to order at 6:01 PM and ask our treasurer for a roll call.
Reverend Eilert.
Here.
Mr. Doherty.
Here.
Dr. Lorenz.
Here.
Dr. Schwetchenow.
Here.
Mrs. Washburn.
Here. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the board agenda. I would ask for a motion to adopt the agenda, moving the items 1.7 and 1.8, welcoming of guests and pledge of allegiance, up before we have the resolutions to adopt the minutes.
So moved.
A second.
I have Mr. Doherty moving and Mrs. Washburn seconding. Are there any questions about the agenda? Other than those I just suggested, there are no changes to what you've seen on board docs. Mr. Dufresne, can we vote on
Mr.
that?
Doherty.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes,
Dr. Schwetchenow.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
motion carried. I would then like to welcome guests. At the moment, the only guests I see here in person are our administrative staff members, so welcome to you. I would like to welcome anyone who is following us online, as the meeting is streamed and the meeting will be recorded so that you can watch it later. I would ask that all of us rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first four items that we have for resolutions are meeting minutes. And so we would start with a motion to approve the 11/16/2021 Board of Education meeting minutes.
So moved.
Mr. Doherty moved. I'll second that motion. Any questions or any corrections? I will say that I reviewed the minutes and found a couple of minor typographical items, so I had those changed. So we are approving minutes as they are presented in the board docs agenda. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Dufresne, can we vote on that?
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes,
Dr. Schwetchenow.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes.
motion carried. The next item would be a motion to approve the minutes for the December 7th, 2021 board meeting work session.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Washburn moved and Mr. Doherty seconded. Any questions, corrections, or items on those minutes? Seeing none, Mr. Dufresne?
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Dr. Schwetchenow.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert. Dr. Lorenz.
Yes, motion carried. The third set of minutes is the special meeting minutes for December 16th, 2021. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Washburn moved
Second.
and Mr. Doherty seconded. What's happening with the right side of the table?
I feel like I'm slow.
Reverend Island's okay. He was not actually here for those
Reading there.
minutes.
I was trying-
Okay, any discussion on the special meeting minutes? Mr. Dufresne?
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert. Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Dr. Schwetchenow.
Yes.
And finally, we have a motion carried. Finally, we have a motion for the adoption, the acceptance of the approval of the January 4th, 2022 organizational meeting minutes.
So moved.
Dr. Schwetchenow moved. Is there a second?
Second.
And Reverend Eilert seconded. Any questions or additions or corrections? Seeing none, Mr. Dufresne?
Dr. Schwetchenow.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert. Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
And thanks very much for helping us to get those.
Motion carried. So we are now again up to date with our minutes.
Yep.
The next item on the agenda is hearing of the public. As I mentioned before, for the viewing this meeting as it is streamed or viewing the meeting as it's recorded, I only see members, I see members of our administration here this evening. I do not see other guests or other audience members. And I think each of those administrative members will have a chance to address us later. So I do not have any hearing of the public for this evening. I will comment at this time just as a resume for the Board of Education, a resume of the communication that we've had since the January 4th meeting. Before I do that, I want to announce or thank or give kudos to some community members for a communication to the district that happened today I think there were donuts and coffee that was delivered around the district, and this was in appreciation for the work that the district staff has been doing. So that was certainly a welcome communication to the district, I think. What the board has received since the January 4th organizational meeting are primarily emails. They've been sent to the board and to the superintendent, and they have primarily been concerned with COVID protocols and especially masking. We have received over 40 copies of a letter that was in a specific form. All those letters were concerned with continuing the current masking protocol or extending it, and they were also concerned with student mental, social, emotional health. I've tried by return email to confirm receipt of all of those, or as many of those as possible. We have also received a few in numbers, 3 or 4, but in equal numbers of individual emails, either requesting continued masking or requesting the cessation of the masking protocol for all grade levels. Additionally, I have replied to one email regarding the start date for school in August 2022, and you will note that we have the second reading of the calendar on the agenda this evening. So after that, the start date can be published. And then I received another email. I'm not sure if it came to the whole board. It was regarding substitute positions with Loveland Schools, so I forwarded that email to Mr. Collier, and I hope that we got another substitute out of that email. So that's a summary of the communication that we've had since January 4th. There's nothing else at this point. We'll move on to presentations. Mr. Broadwater, are you introducing Mr. Coles, or is
I will introduce.
himself?
I will introduce Mr. Jesse Coles, who is our Student Services Director. We felt it was important that Jesse's able to portray everything we have going on in our school district in terms of student services, which could be special education as well as the student services. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Coles. Yep.
All right, thank you guys for allowing me to be here this evening. This is actually the first time that I've had a chance to speak to you as a group since I've taken on this role, so I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the faith and the trust in allowing me to take on this role, so thank you for that. It's also the first time I have spoken to you since I am not the principal at LCSD. So now it's on. See, at LCSD, that's a brighter green, and that threw me off. So I apologize that the mic wasn't on. I was just thanking the board for the opportunity. So first time I had a chance to talk to you all and preach, to speak to you as not the principal of LACC. So now that I'm at district office, we're going to be much more professional. I won't make you stand up. I really wanted to. Andrea said it's probably not a great idea. I won't make you do cheers. Again, I wanted to. But what I thought I would do is give you a little pep talk, just so you can see some of our leadership style here at the office. But I need your help. So I'm going to need 4 numbers. If you can all just yell out a number between 1 and 15. I got a 7,
9,
9,
4.
4, 12. Oh, those are fabulous numbers. If I were going to pick, those are the numbers I would have picked too. So, superstar, what you got going on raises the roof, period. So, superstar, what you got going on raises the roof. And that is my message to you as a board. That is my pep talk for you. If you want to pull up the pep talk. So, I know it sounds like I just make these things up off the top of my head, but I really don't. When I have people come in, I can tell are feeling a little down. I have them give them some, can you give me 4 numbers? And then that's how I decide how I want to guide them and provide their support throughout the day. So just a quick little pep talk generator at the top. It says, turn that frown upside down. And I feel like that's just a great reminder for all of us. Even though we have masks on and we can't see them, it's really important to find a way to smile. It's important to find a way to relax. It's important to find the positive in whatever it is we're doing. So we look for ways when we start our meetings to have some sort of a celebration. And this is just some simple, silly little way to do that I felt like was a little more professional than making you stand up and do the cheers that I made you do when I was at LACC. So with that being said, we can jump in to the presentation, John, and actually share a little bit of work. So I'm super excited to use the clicker. Before you all got here, I was practicing. I went behind the back, around my neck, through the legs. You call it, I could probably pull it off. Right, John? I don't want to over deliver on things here. So just have a quick little update before we jump in. So right on cue, I can't do it. Try behind the back. Am I pointing at the right thing, John? There we go. Whoa, now we're going through a whole bunch of things. All right, so right off the bat, before we jump in, I just wanted to say thanks to some people. In reality, these folks are really doing an awesome job, and they're what make our office run smoothly. Becky Clark and Denise Bradley, those are the two young ladies that work at the desks or the tables if you come in, and they do a fabulous job. Student-centered customer service mindset. I get to work closely with Andrea, Mrs. Connor on the teaching and learning aspect of things. We try to work together. We touch base pretty much every day on different things and just trying to make sure our offices are aligned and everything we do is with how can we help every student be successful every day. That is the mindset we're approaching. Super supportive team. What I love about our team is one, the number one thing is everyone is student-centered. Mr. Broadwater, Mr. Collier, Mr. Ames, and all the folks that are working behind the scenes, we all have the same goal in mind. What can we do to help the kids we serve? How can we make sure all of our students are receiving all of the supports they need? So I just wanted to send a kudos and a thank you to all of those folks before we jumped in and got started. Our office is Pupil Services, Student Services, whatever phrasing you would like to use. Pupil Services is what is on our website and what is in most of our verbiage, so that is what we will use. But here is our goal, here's our vision, here's our mission. It's pretty simple. When I was a principal, no matter where I was, no matter what age group I served, we had one thing in mind. We wanted our kids to run in faster than they ran out. If your kids are running in faster than they are running out, that speaks to the student experience and what's going on during the day. And if that is happening, you're really able to help them grow and help them develop. So I've taken that same philosophy and I've brought it to our office at the district level. What can we do to ensure students are running into school faster than they are running out? How are we providing individual supports? How are we supporting every student in a cost-effective and efficient way? And that's kind of all of that verbiage is kind of that in a nutshell. We're just trying to find ways to make sure we are supporting all the students we serve. Got a little cocky with the behind the back apparently, because now I can't even do it straight on. So a couple of things we're going to touch on tonight. Just a quick glimpse of the students we serve, talk a little bit about, give you a little bit of an update on preschool, talk a little bit about full day kindergarten, a quick update on our English language learner program, quick update on special education, and an update on the social emotional mental health supports that we are offering at Loveland. So lots of different things, a cornucopia of topics, if you will. I don't know why I said that, sorry. There will be links embedded throughout the presentation. I'm not going to click on them. We will reference them, but those are things that you can review and check out on your own and then let me know if you have any follow-up questions. So here's just a quick glimpse of, this is based on the 2021 Ode Report Card. You can see the students we serve, just over 4,000. You can see here how those student demographics are broken down. ODE gives us lots of things that we don't necessarily always agree with, but this one I do. They say each child means each child. And I think that's a really important reminder when we're talking about the students we serve. If we're going to talk about serving each child, then we need to live by that and make sure that's what we're actually doing. Quick update on preschool. Right now we're serving 106 students. 42 of those students are on an IEP in our integrated classrooms. An integrated preschool classroom means half of the class has an IEP and half of the class does not. We also serve 5 students in a social communication room, 6 students itinerant. That means they are not in one of our classrooms, but they are receiving support from either a speech and language person, occupational therapist, or one of our intervention specialists. We can see we have 48 students that pay tuition. And there's a little bit about the tuition up there. And we also serve this year 15 students are additionally served through Head Start. We don't run Head Start, but Head Start does use one of our classrooms. They utilize an LACC classroom. So we're excited that 15 more families have the opportunity to send their child to preschool. And then from a personal or from the school's point of view, we get to see that student sooner and start building those relationships and helping those children and helping those families prior to them starting kindergarten with us. A little bit more on preschool. So we work really hard. Mrs. Gary and her team are working really hard to ensure that we continue to have a high step up to quality rating. We have traditionally been a 5-star rated program, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that continues. We also receive outstanding feedback from our families. So the link that says feedback from families, when you have a minute, if you click on that, you can see what kind of thoughts our families shared when they completed an end of year survey. And that's something we do every year with our preschool students and their families. And we submit that information to ODE as part of our 5-star rating process, that we are patiently waiting this year's visit. When they come in, we'll be ready to go. The team has worked hard, and ultimately they do really good things for kids. What we need to make sure we do is we document that correctly, and we receive the credit from ODE that we deserve. So that's kind of an update on preschool. The next thing I would like to talk about a little bit is just our full day K and kindergarten in general. Quick recap. I'm not going to read, there's a ton of words on this slide, so I'm not going to read them all to you, but I will just let you know that in 2018, 2019, we had 3 full day kindergarten classes, which was awesome. And it was a great start to offering full day K to our families. And some of you were here when that happened, so we appreciate you allowing that to happen and you working with us to make that happen. The concern that we had from the school's point of view is right around 50% of our families that wanted to or that applied for full day K were not able to have access to it. We just didn't have enough spots. We didn't have enough offerings for them. So we knew that was an issue. So we worked hard to expand it. And in 1920 school year, we jumped from 3 to 5. We went from serving 72 students to 120 students, which was awesome. We were super excited about that, really excited about the opportunity to expand full day kindergarten and that offering for our families. But we still had anywhere from 25 to 40 families waiting on that wait list. We were losing families that would enroll their kids other places because they didn't get full day K with us. 2021 obviously was the pandemic year. We did not offer full day K because we were trying to maximize our staffing and minimize class sizes as much as possible. But the feedback was still there that this was a need. This was something our community was asking for. And this school year, thank you to you all for your help with this. We were able again to expand our full day K program. And if you remember, we did that without adding an FTE. We were able to reallocate one of our FTEs from a different spot, shift it down to kindergarten, and expand to 7 full day K classrooms. We now serve 168 students in full day K. And what was most exciting to me to start the school year was we had no families on the full day K wait list. So when our families started the school year and they registered for kindergarten, if they wanted full day kindergarten, we were able to offer it to them, which was outstanding. As of now, we do have a couple of people as the year has progressed that have been added to the full day K wait list. But to start the year, we were really, really proud of that. And I appreciate you all, the folks that were here supporting that and making that happen for LACC, for Loveland, and for our families, because that's a need that we have heard about, and it's something we will continue to work hard to support. Just a quick glimpse of the numbers. I'm not going to sit here and read all of these things to you. You can see what our tuition is. I do think it's important to look at the bottom right-hand corner and look at our enrollment data. That's something I hear a lot about and see different posts about. 18-19, we were at 298. 19-20, we were at 295. Then 2021 was an odd year. It was COVID. So that number dipped. We expected that dip. A lot of folks chose to homeschool or do some other things or wait to put their kids in kindergarten, whatever. But we have bounced back. If you look at this year's number, it is right where we were pre-pandemic for those 2 school years. It's actually a couple students higher. So we're really excited about what we are seeing from our families. And I would argue part of that is because we were able to expand our full day K options, and we kept some of those families that would have left and gone other places. So we're excited about that. A couple of goals with this. We want to do our best to continue to offer full day K for families. If our families want full day K, we're going to do everything we can to offer it to them. We had no wait list, no lottery. We're hoping to be able to do that again. In order to make that happen, obviously, we have to continue to watch enrollment, watch class sizes, and things like that. But that's a quick summary of full day K. Any questions on that? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. You want questions as we go
We may
along?
as well, just because the topics are
Right, different.
like so different. Yep.
First grade, it would be 330-ish.
That sounds right.
Sounds right. So about 10% more to go if you assumed that we have a community with kind of equal representation in the kindergarten age, right? If you I don't know what keeps it below 330. Maybe FDK will, the word will get out and we'll have more. If you did get up to 330, do we have the ability to do that?
I haven't done the math on that. Garth and I would have to sit down and look at it. But looking at this just real quick off the top of my head, it would be close. Our classes then, what we're trying to do is be mindful of how large our classes get.
Right.
Because right now, our half-day class size is really nice. We're looking at about 17 kids a room. So we do have some capacity to absorb some more kids. It really would depend on how many of them want full-day options and if we would need to shift some things around or not. But yes, there's some room there. Go ahead.
So one more to get to that full number if we needed to. All right, that's okay. We don't have to go any
Yeah.
further. It's,
Jesse, would you have concerns about the physical space if we had to add a classroom? Is there the ability to do that?
Yeah. Fortunately, with the changes we made this year and bringing our first grade together, we do have some flexibility at LCSD to where we could pull off the physical space to make that happen. Because right now we have how many classrooms? 11. So yes, we would be fine with that. And we do have room with Head Start being there where we have some flexibility if we needed to
Right.
relocate
imagine-
that again.
if that happened, it wouldn't happen all at once. But it looks like we've got some capacity to grow right now. If we grew all the way, we might have some challenge to deal with.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Mr. Doherty. I don't know if that's something we would want to try to attempt to do all at once. The gradual growth model that we've had in place, I think, has done us really well. And as of right now, we are meeting the community needs. The supply meets the demand right now, but that changes every year. So we don't know what folks are going to request next year.
And just to reiterate, this is the first year that we've had the opportunity to offer everybody who wants full-day kindergarten to have the opportunity to do that.
Yes.
And I know this and you know this, but just to reiterate, you guys all did a ton of work in order to make the learning experience better for all of the children by combining schools and combining classes, moving half of the first grade from LECC to the LPS building in order to accommodate that. I just have a quick question on enrollment trend data. It looks pretty flat from 18 to 21, 22. My assumption based on our previous history is that our expectation is that that stays flat. Mr. Doherty's concern or question really regards like, what if all of the children decide to take advantage of this? And it sounds like we have the ability to offer that if we need to. Just to reiterate though, even though enrollment trend is flat, the difference has been that we've offered full day kindergarten and previously these people were only offered half day.
That's exactly right. So if you go all the way back to 1819, we had 3 full-day rooms. Everyone else was a half-day class. So we had, what is that, 60 some odd kids, 72 kids, whatever it is, at full day. Everyone else was a half-day program. And that number has just gradually increased the last few years
What
with
generated
that.
the line of questioning was really that thought that perhaps what the community wants is FTK. And you got a real good reaction the first time you really made it easily available. As that sinks in, maybe you get more. And the question is our ability to.
I think the good news is you have the physical space to do it. That's usually the first limiter. And normally what you'll see if you have larger full-day kindergarten numbers, you're losing your half-day. And sometimes if the numbers work out the sweet spot, you don't even have to add that FTE. But if they don't, and you want to keep your half-day kindergarten appropriate, then you might end up adding an FTE. But the good news, again, is I think through the planning, moving the first grade to LPS, like you had stated, allows for this growth. And kudos to the people that did it.
So the $34.65 a year in tuition covers all costs. So if we have the classroom space available and we needed to have another teacher, we have the money to pay for another teacher.
I wouldn't say it covers all. I would have to look into it. Normally, the way it works, it doesn't cover everything. You're still receiving some state funds for the half day because you have to, you have to make sure you offer the half day. So you're still receiving some of those state funds. But you would have to look and see. I would say it's probably pretty close, but it also depends on the ability of families and so forth.
Mr. Doherty, that's something Mr. Holly worked on when he was here. I don't have that report. I didn't think about it. Otherwise, I would have linked that in. But it did not completely cover the cost, but it really did offset the cost significantly to where, because this was, when we were going through a lot of things with the levy, this was obviously something that we spent a lot of time talking about too.
Mike's point just now, if a family can't afford it, they're out.
Not necessarily. So if folks are still eligible to apply for free and reduced and things like that, which then we are able to offer support and help and waivers and things like that. We also talked about down the line, not right now, not this school year, but in the future, looking for ways to partner with other folks and offer scholarship programs and things like that. But yes, folks do free and reduced lunch is a consideration when it comes to tuition programs.
Another great potential use of our foundation as well that we talked about to offer scholarships through the foundation for the.
Yeah.
That's,
full day.
yeah.
That's the exact conversation that we had. So that's awesome. Yeah.
Certainly don't, if there's a family that would like to access full day kindergarten, you would hate for the funding to be what limits them. We believe obviously that the kids are best in school in full day kindergarten if a family wants it. And there's some families, they want the half day option, but the full day kindergarten, we would make every effort to have conversations with the family to see how we could make that happen.
Did we do studies? I know one of the concerns I heard during the election cycle was the cost of the program and people saying, oh, we're charging tuition, but thinking about childcare costs. Have we kind of raised that up at all? Like, this is what it would cost a family to have their child in childcare for a half day in addition. And, I assume this, thinking about our preschool tuition rates, that's a pretty good rate per month for a half day program.
I have not done any type of study like that. No, I can anecdotally speak to it as a dad of 5 children, and this is significantly cheaper than what I pay, but
Yeah.
but I don't have any like actual data to back that up.
Right.
So this is just something we're super proud of. We want to keep being able to support the community need here and see, and that's something that'll evolve every year. Some years we might have 168 that want full day K, maybe next year. To Mr. Doherty's point, that word starts to spread that this is available and that number increases. Selfishly, as an educator, as a former principal at LECC, I want them all full day K. Bring them all, get them all in here all day long, and we'll teach them up the best that we can. We also understand, to Mike's point, Mr. Broadwater's point, we have families that want to do half day, and that's fine. So we'll just continue to work with that and do our best. Our goal is to be able to continue to start the year with no wait list and no lottery. If we have 330 kids that say they want full day K, we will have to revisit that plan and probably do some sort of a lottery system again, or come talk to you all and have a conversation of, do we want to reallocate an FTE? Do we want to add a 0.5 for a half day teacher? Whatever the case may be. So it depends on registration opens soon. This is one of the first questions they are asked. Are you interested in full day K? We can start to get a sense of what those numbers will look like.
This is just one of the big positive stories from last year with all the problems that we've had here, all of the problems that we've had, the money problems, the controversies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You guys figured out a way to expand services for kids and for families. And it looks like it was a big hit. So
The kudos goes to you all for allowing that to happen, but we are super proud of this.
you made it an easy decision for us, to be honest. So.
The last thing I would say is yes to all that. This is a big deal. This affects kids directly, and kudos to everybody doing it. And that's why in August, sometimes with kindergarten, you hear us asking for an FTE because the registration is difficult. Every other grade level, you've got pretty good predictors, and you know how many kids you have. With kindergarten, sometimes it's up to the last minute doing some gymnastics. But all of these people have done a very good job with it.
Do we have comparative data for educational outcomes for kids that are half day versus full day here in Loveland? I mean, we know nationally there's good evidence of the efficacy of that, but.
Yeah, so we have some things. In reality, the last couple of years have been really weird. So what we have up there, you see where it says a 2019 presentation on full day K. When you have a minute, you can check that out. That'll talk to social emotional learning. It'll talk to student behavior, readiness to learn, and things of that nature. It'll give you some Ames Web scores. It'll give you some intervention group numbers, kids that were here full day, kids that were here half day. We work really hard to make sure our half day program academically presents the same opportunities as our full day K. What we can't replicate are some of those social growth opportunities, going out to recess, going to lunch, going to specials on a regular basis for a decent extended amount of time, having soft mornings with STEAM bends and things like that. In a half day setting, your time is limited. From an academic point of view and teaching the reading and the math and those types of things, we work really hard though to make sure kiddos that are here half day get the same learning experience as the kids that are here full day. Can't deny though, the kids that are here full day, they've been in school full day. You start first grade ready to go. Your stamina is already built up. The kids that were here half day have to build up to that. They're going to the cafeteria for the first time. They're learning what lunch looks like. They're learning how to come back from lunch, calm down from recess, and jump back into learning. So there are significant differences. And if you click on that presentation, that's something the LECC team put together for the 2018-2019 school year when we were looking at expanding from 3 to 5. Great question. Any other thoughts on full day K? Fabulous. I have no good transitions, so here we go. Next topic. I guess that's as good as the transition is going to get. English language learners. Just wanted to highlight a couple of things on this. This is another area we're really proud right now based on final forms and whatever forms our kiddos fill out when they enroll. We have 25 different languages in our school, which is outstanding. I can maybe name 3, but we have 25 of them. Obviously, Spanish is a big one, Uzbek, Russian, Chinese, to name a few. But this is something we're super proud of. Again, we have over 100 students that we're serving. We have 3 ESL teachers working really hard to serve those students. If you look up at the right-hand side, there's some common acronyms. Not going to read through them now. The bottom left-hand side kind of talks a little bit about the program. Kiddos come in at level 1. As a newcomer, they work their way through. And, the goal is to score 4s and 5s on this test and to be able to exit the program. If you look at the little chart on the bottom right-hand corner, I know the font is super small and the print's really small. But basically what that is showing you is our English language learners are a really mobile group. They're very transient. So kids come in and they go out. So sometimes I can tell you right now, we're actually serving 101 students just because I looked at it yesterday. When we get our report from ODE, it might say like 85. So the numbers aren't always going to line up simply based on when the kids are here. That's really difficult to gauge sometimes when folks say, hey, how many kids are you serving? Well, sometimes we're up to, like a few weeks ago when I ran the numbers, we were at 112. So the numbers are just they fluctuate, and I just think that's important to recognize. Our teachers do an awesome job of trying to keep up with kids and families as they're moving in and out and supporting them.
Jesse, would I be correct in assuming that this is one of the areas that we use the service center for, the Hamilton County Service?
Yes, that is a correct assumption.
25 languages, you couldn't
Yep.
handle that.
So we have all 3 of our ESL teachers are,
What?
I said, yes, you can.
so all 3 of our ESL teachers are from Hamilton County Educational Services. Yes, that is a contracted service that we use. The other thing I would like to point out with this group is just the significant increase that continues to happen. So if you look at this chart, you can see the numbers continue to grow. Last year, according to ODE, we had 82 students in our program. I can tell you that number was higher, but based on how long they were here, when they were here, that's what we received credit for. Right now, like I said, we are at 101 students. One of the things I do want you to notice is if you look at LECC and LPS, we're at 21 and 34, and then the numbers just kind of gradually get lower. That's a credit to the staff and to the teachers because what's happening is the students are working through the program and eventually testing out to where they are no longer identified as an English language learner. So those numbers should continue to decline as they progress through school and they are here with us longer. You know, some of the challenges we continue to face with that would be some language barriers and just working through with them high school credits. They're a newcomer. They've never spoken English. And guess what? We've got to figure out how to help you graduate on time. We have kiddos that we're trying to make sure pass the 3rd grade reading guarantee. Transportation is a huge hurdle for this population. With that being said, we have a lot of successes. We were really excited that 100% of our ELL families at the elementary level participated in conferences. And that's a credit to our teachers, again, using available technology, using translator apps, using different translator services that we have via telephone and having translators come in. We're really proud of that. We're super excited to see more ELL kids participating in extracurriculars than we ever have before, specifically theater, wrestling, and soccer. Those were big ones this year. We're excited that we're offering better access to full day K. If you think about what our full day K used to be, it was a lottery system. So the folks with the language barrier probably had the most, not probably, they had the most difficulty entering said lottery. So their chances of getting a spot were significantly lower. By eliminating the lottery, we were able to expand the number of students that we had here all day. And just through supports, we see these numbers decrease as they work through our program.
Could you comment more? You emphasized that transportation was a challenge.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so when we have folks that have language barriers, it's a lot harder for them to set up a carpool or to get with other people and to make arrangements to get their kids to and from school. So when I talk to I meet with the ESL teachers, I meet with the ESL team once a month. And when I talk to the folks that work with high school kids, this is something that they have reiterated almost every time we met. It's really hard for their families and for their kids to get to and from places, which impacts not just academics, it impacts their opportunity to participate in extracurriculars and things like that too. So what we try to do is our best in supporting them. We try to connect them with other folks that they live nearby, and we try to help set up different transportation, for lack of a better term, carpools and things like that. We try to coordinate. We work with Nest a little bit and see if there's they can do to help out. But that is one of the things that we have struggled with this group of kids. Any other thoughts, questions, ELL?
Do you know how many of our teachers are SIOP trained?
I do not. I at LACC, we had 4 or 5 because they went through the training while I was there. I don't know after those other buildings where we are with that. We have some that are SIOP lights. And by that, I mean they're not officially SIOP trained, but some of us have been. Myself, Amy Reese, a couple of the other ESL teachers, and we provide different little strategies and opportunities and things they can do within the classroom. But as far as folks that have actually been through the SIOP training, I don't know. It's a great question. We can find out.
Jesse probably doesn't remember, but we were in SIOP classes together back in the day.
What does that stand for?
Do you want to talk about it? I don't know.
You're welcome to. I don't mind.
I mean, it's just a framework to help teachers be able to better help students with accessing language. I don't
So
know
we
what-
want to make sure when we're presenting and talking about something, we have a visual to go with it. So if I'm talking about vegetables, maybe I have a picture of
I
vegetables or
see.
I have actual vegetables.
So it's a
that-
teaching method?
It's a teaching method. We're using different graphics. We're doing things orally and physically and just making sure folks can hear us, can see us. Those types of things, using way less words, like these PowerPoints that I'm sharing with you would be terrible. Way too much text on them. Eliminate some of that text, throw up some visuals, that type of thing.
But it's a model that helps all students too.
Yeah, it's great for everybody. You're repeating things, that type of thing. Yep.
So I'm sorry to circle back one step, but we've talked a lot about transportation at the high school, and you've just given us a little more texture when we talk about some of the neediest are the ones that aren't getting it.
Right.
What do we mean by that? Got to come back to this subject some more.
I just had a quick question about the x-axis of this graph. I'm sorry, the y-axis of this graph. 2018, 2019, do you know what the numbers were then?
I do not. I pulled this off of ODE's website and I tried to pull up previous years so I could plug the numbers in like I did the 82 and the 101, but it would not, they don't have individual charts like this archived. All I could get was the report card.
The only reason I ask is sure this isn't a bigger problem than I think it could be. Because if that curve is accurate, it's 100, 80, 60, 40, which is a really big change over a short period of time.
It's definitely a huge change. And I can tell you from being a building principal, we saw it, we experienced it. The other thing to point out with that change, while that number has increased, we've been able to maintain the staffing that we have in place. So that number continues to jump, but we still have 3 ESL teachers providing these supports. At some point, that's something we're going to have to talk about. But to answer that, again, anecdotally, and I can tell you from being in the building, we have had quite a few students move in where English is not their primary language. We have folks that, whatever happens, they go on a mission trip, or 1 or 2 families move here, let them know how great it is, and then that just starts to expand, and you see different complexes, different neighborhoods with little pockets of different groups of folks, and we're excited to have them, and I think they really bring a lot of value to our district. What we need to figure out is, are we doing everything we can to set them up to be successful?
Do we have a specific district strategy for ELL, or has it kind of just been ad hoc at this point?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I fully understand the question, but we do, as far as a strategy goes, we have teams in place. We have at the LACC, Danny Miller works at the next building. It's Amy Reese. Christy Bruck works at the following building. And what we do is we just really make sure those folks are a big part of the team. We wrap our arms around all of our kiddos. And in reality, those people, the ELL team, they're part of when we have data conversations and when we have, and some of this stuff I'll talk a little bit about later when we address mental health needs and things like that. We really do try to look at the whole child and look at that picture, so that I guess the strategy is, to Eileen's point, getting as many folks trained on different topics as possible, making sure we are assigning our team where the needs are. So for example, LPS right now has 34 students. We pulled, if you look at LMS, they have 9. So we pulled the EL teacher from LMS. Part of her day is now spent at LPS providing supports there. So I guess as I'm saying it out loud, the answer is it is an ad hoc approach based on needs. And that's where, when I say the staffing hasn't changed, but the number of kids has, we're trying to be really creative with how we meet those needs, looking at other things. How do we build a schedule where, and this applies to our mental health supports as well, where our classes are small enough that we can form these relationships and figure out what these needs are. That applies to our EL kiddos. How do we offer classes where they can receive support and receive things they need without needing necessarily the ESL teacher in there all the time? So there are ways where we can creatively look at supporting kids, ELL, mental health, academic, doesn't matter. We can creatively look at ways of supporting them without expanding what we're asking current staff to do.
I just think,
So to give you a great answer, I don't have one.
yeah, when you got 40 kids like a couple of years ago, then easy to do ad hoc. When you're hitting 100 and to Eric's point, if it's going to continue to grow, and I don't know if there's a way to even project that or not, but there might be some resources to help us think about, what kind of projections could you make there. It's probably worth looking at from a strategic standpoint of, what kind of services do we need to think about growing into regularity in offerings that we have so that we can meet the needs of students.
Yeah, agreed completely. And I know I don't want to make Andrea talk because people do that to her all the time, but she's working with some high school groups on making creatively offering classes that provide different supports. Our ESL team reached out to a lot of the apartment complexes. Last year, we drove to them and had kindergarten registration events. This year, we've gotten pushback on that. Folks don't want us there. Whatever, it's their facility. We're not going to argue with them on that. But we are attempting to figure out how we can reach as many families as possible and creatively offer supports and help for them.
The complex owners didn't want you there?
That is correct.
I've run into that a lot too. It's unfortunate.
They feel like in the political climate that we are in, they are setting themselves up for trouble if we are there offering those services. So we're trying to be mindful of that as well. We will continue to look for creative ways. We talked about maybe setting up a hub at LCSD or even here in our building with laptops and translators and hosting our own events, which we already do. We were trying to meet folks where they were, going back to the transportation needs. So we're going to continue to do those things, but you are right. We need to figure out what systemically our program is going to be and what we can do to offer supports, because the support students that come in not speaking the language needs is different than the support other kids need. Doesn't mean they're any less intelligent. It just means figuring out how they can access the information. It's on us.
So I think it would be beneficial at some point to hear from not just the 3 ESL teachers, but from teachers who have a high population, the successes they're experiencing and the challenges. And I don't think it needs to be anything real formal, and we don't need to take up their time. But if, like, maybe you could put something out there and have them send some notes to you, and I think that would be good for us to see. And the other thing I was going to ask is if you could just comment so everybody listening and up here is aware of like the funding that goes along with the population.
No. I can't really comment because I don't really know what it is that you're asking as far
Just like
as.
the money, a lot of funding comes from Title I fund. And a lot of resources come along with that. So it might be good for us to see that at some point in time, obviously.
The only thing I would counter to that is some districts, yes, a lot of those resources come. Unfortunately, like most of the other programs at Loveland, the way our district is set up, we don't receive a ton of funding for these types of things. We did receive a little bit of additional ELL funding this year with COVID and things like that. But for the most part, it's not the funding definitely does not offset the costs that we are paying even for just the 3 ESL teachers that we have in place.
And that was kind of to go way back and much less strategically than both Jonathan and Eileen referenced it. If our numbers have doubled in the past 3 years, we probably need to think a little bit about how that puts stress on the staff that we have. One of the complaints that we've had is that we have had more staff than is necessary. And while I've been here, I've seen the opposite. We've had less staff than is necessary, and we're putting a lot of strain on the people that we have. So to go back to strategic planning, it's hard to strategically plan when you don't know what's going to show up at your door. But I'm very confident that you have the ability to make sure that we don't burn out the ESL teachers and other staff that we have by putting more and more burden on them because we don't have the finances.
If I were just to jump in, Mr. Collier is going to make the presentation next month, which is the FTE, and give you a history of the FTE. And so when you talk about being strategic, that is part of it. Let's see where we've been, where we are. You always want to do things smarter. And the other comment I would make is when I look at these numbers, kudos to our ESL teachers because these numbers are going down. So we're getting 4s and 5s and we're moving kids to where they need to be in that spectrum. So the good news is it's moving in the proper direction when it comes to the education of these children. The tough part would be being strategic with the FTEs, and we don't want to overtax our teachers and not have the numbers that we have right here. So if we see the continued growth like this, then yes, we're going to have to make some adjustments.
Yep, those are all great points. And Eileen mentioned earlier PSYOP. So the staff members that have a high population or several students that don't speak English in their classroom, we try to strategically place them with teachers that have received that training, and we try to be mindful of how we're putting support staff in and out of the room and that type of thing. But it is hard, and it is a lot of work. You've got to pull up these translation apps and know which language to translate in. And but that doesn't mean you can't build a relationship. A smile is universal. Doesn't matter what language we're speaking. I can make a connection with someone by looking at them, smiling at them, and laughing, and just making sure they feel welcome when they come to the building. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. Again, if we can get folks running in faster than they run out, it's because they feel good about being here. They feel safe. They feel protected. They feel heard. And that's what we really preach with our teams. If we're doing those things, we're going to get the academics in place. We'll make sure we have the supports in place. But we really want to focus on being relationship-centered, persons first.
Jesse, I wouldn't ask you to name or to answer this with specifics, but is there a concentration of a particular nationality represented in this growth?
Yeah, we've seen a nice jump in Russian and Uzbek. Those two nationalities, I would say, are the biggest jump we have seen the last couple of years.
I don't know if it's a resource for you, but we saw something similar in the business world. We have new worker populations from particular countries, and it finally had some correlation to consulates. They immigrated to a part of the country where there was consulate support, and I have no idea what consulates are we might be serviced by.
Yep.
But that might be a communications pathway when you were talking about the apartment complexes, not wanting you, there might be another way to get to these populations.
Yeah, thank you. I'll definitely look into that. And I don't want to pigeonhole all the apartment complexes, but I'm also not going to call anybody out by name. We've had some tell us no directly. All right, transition. So the next thing we want to talk a little bit about is special education. Again, like everyone else, the report cards are different. The criterion have changed. With COVID, a lot of things are just looking different than what they used to. But the fact of the matter is that ODE still provided special education report cards and feedback and things like that for districts. You can see on ours, our 2021 rating meets requirements. We're super excited about that. Required actions done. Our IDA compliant. So that's a shout out again to Becky downstairs. She does a fabulous job of making sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and all the dates are met and all the paperwork is done correctly. We have, you'll see on a future slide, 561 students on IEPs. That's a lot of paperwork to make sure is correct. To be compliant and have no corrective actions is awesome. So not a lot to say to that other than the folks are doing a really good job. There's a link on there you're welcome to click on and check out. It's a much more detailed breakdown of what that report card looked like for us. And you can check that out and then let me know if you have any questions in the future. But here's just a quick rundown. This is again based on the 2021 report card. Our enrollment's up there. About 13.5% of our students are identified as students with disability. So that's 561 kids. We have 48.8. I don't know how we have a 0.8 person teaching, but we do. 48.8 teachers, that's 11.7 per 1,000 students. The state average is 13.7 teachers per 1,000 students. So again, folks doing less with more, really doing a good job of utilizing the staff we have and being mindful of the folks we have on staff and working hard with that. You can see there we have right around 55 students that are using different programs. They're our students. But they receive services other places. And of those, here's just a quick breakdown of the students we serve. The overwhelming majority, about a third of them, are students with specific learning disabilities. So that's going to be your reading, your writing, your math disabilities. There is new legislation, dyslexia legislation that is out that we don't know how this is going to impact. The guess is we will start to see an upward trend in reading disabilities. Don't know that for sure, but we're guessing that will lead to some more diagnoses as we continue to look at different assessments that we're going to be giving and screeners. But as of right now, that's what the numbers stand. So a third of our students are SLD. Then we have something called OHI minor. That's going to be like ADHD, ADD, some kiddos that may miss some class because of diabetes and just those types of conditions. And then autism is the next one, the next highest percentage of students for us. So those three make up the majority of the types of IEPs that we write. But you could see across the board, we have pretty much every category, at least a student in each of those categories there. The 0.5 tells me it's probably just that, a student. But again, lots of different categories. When we have 561 kids on IEPs, we have a lot of different things happening. Any questions on that? That's pretty straightforward. Those are pretty much just numbered based, just numbers for you all to see and be aware of. All right, so the next transition we want to talk a little bit about are our social emotional health supports. This is one of those things, like, we think it's super important. We all recognize the need. And sometimes recognizing the need hits you smack in the face when you see headlines and you see things on Twitter and you see students passing away and students dying at nearby districts. Like, over break, Madeira had this hit that's right down the road from us. So this is something we're trying to be mindful of. What are our kids' needs and what are we doing to support them? So social emotional learning is the process through which we're supporting kids and helping them manage emotions, set positive goals, show empathy. How do we build positive relationships, that type of thing. And in reality, or in addition to that, the state of Ohio recognized the need as well. We actually have K-12 social emotional learning standards. Not everyone is aware of that. We have some folks that still give a little pushback on why are we doing this? Well, for a couple of reasons. One, we think it's best for kids. That's the number one reason we're doing it. And two, the state of Ohio has created standards for us to cover K-12. So those are the things, and you could see up there what those areas are: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and decision-making. So those are, a lot of these things are embedded in the work we do, but we also want to make sure we are explicitly teaching these skills to the students we serve. So just a quick history of that. So a lot of times we get caught up in what's going on. We get caught up in the latest acronym, and you hear social emotional and you think that's a new thing. Social emotional learning, mental health supports, they're not new. They are just, for whatever reason, sometimes at the forefront. In 2015, the state developed a board, or approved a board of folks to come up with standards. They, at that time, had social emotional learning standards for kindergarten through third grade. In 2018, they're like, this is actually really good stuff and it's really important. We should probably expand this. So they put out a survey, put together a group. The survey results are linked there. If you would like to see them, you're welcome to check them out. And then as a result, in 2019, the K-12 social emotional learning standards were adopted. The ODE guidebook is there. Again, you're welcome to check it out. Fabulous reading. It's really actually not bad, but it'll give you a sense of what the expectations are for schools. And then the pandemic hit. That stuff did not go away. So you can see we still did a lot of this work. We just had to do it differently when the kids are not sitting in front of us. Definitely made it challenging, and we tried to find ways to support students and support families. And there are some links there that you can check out. But I think some of the biggest things you want to know is, according to the Department of Health and Human Services, 1 in 5 students experience some sort of mental health problem during their school years. 1 in 5. If we had 1 in 5 students that weren't reading, or if we had 1 in 5 students that couldn't do math, you better believe we change our practices significantly. So this kind of goes along those lines. If we have that many students experiencing a difficulty in this area, what can we do? What are we doing to provide supports there? So that's kind of a brief history of where we are and why we're doing these things. And just we understand here that preparing students for tomorrow is more than just the 3 R's. The 3 R's are super important, but at the same time, we've got to be able to address some of these needs too. So some of the things we're really proud of and we're super excited about is Hope Squad and Junior Hope Squad. I feel like you all have a really good idea of what that is, but that's a peer-to-peer suicide prevention program. Folks are nominated by their classmates and they're provided with ongoing training from counselors. We really focus on PBIS, that's a positive behavior incentive approach, positive behavior interventions, where we explicitly teach our students what we expect, and then we acknowledge them for making good choices and doing the expected behaviors. And we take a team approach. We wrap our arms around our kids. We loop everybody in, kind of we were talking a little bit about earlier with the EL students, and we just make sure we're looking at what are our students' needs. Little Jesse's struggling with reading. Garth is really struggling with some social cues. What can we do to help both of these students? It'll be 2 different ways, but we're not just looking, we're trying to make sure we're looking at the whole child. We're really excited to have direct instruction K-8 with second step and social thinking lessons. Again, they are aligned to the Ohio Learning Standards, and we're explicitly teaching our students empathy and self-regulation and recognizing your feelings. If you recognize your feelings, you're much more likely to be able to respond to them. And we've really tried to take an approach of making sure this is ongoing, embedded in what we do. If you think about it like exercise, if I go out and run once a month and nothing changes, and then I'm surprised, why isn't anything changing? I ran once a month. Well, we want to look at this the same way. We can't just once a month do an assembly or a program or a special on social emotional awareness and mental health awareness and things like that. It needs to be ongoing, embedded in the work that we do. We're really excited with the work our counselors do. We have lunch bunches on de-escalation. We have calming groups, anxiety groups, emotion regulation, self-esteem, family groups. I sat in on a group at the high school called SEALs. students experiencing a loss. That was really eye-opening for me and really neat to see our students have that support system in place, in-house. They didn't have to go anywhere to get it. They were able to come down for a little bit during their day and receive that support. We have partnerships in place with Children's Home and Nest and Mindpeace and Hamilton County JFS and other folks, and we're really excited about some of this work that we're doing. With that being said, we're going to continue to look for ways to grow and continue to look for ways to get better. On these next few slides, I'm not going to read them. It just goes by each building. So you can click through and check them out. And it has each building's approach to social emotional learning and mental health supports. You'll see a lot of common themes with Second Step, social thinking, Children's Home, some sort of a mentor check-in program, working with Nest, using positive behavior interventions, using a team approach and that type of thing. So moving forward with our social emotional support and our mental health supports, we want to continue to look for ways to meet our students' needs. We want to look at how we design learning environments. We talked a little bit earlier about schedules and classes and how can we create environments where we can have those meaningful relationships and know what's going on with our kids. How can we set up an environment where collaboration is the key with all of our stakeholders? We want to start to look at what our kids have to say. How are the kids feeling? I don't know. Let's ask them. They're a great resource that we may or may not have tapped into well enough that we want to try to make sure we're checking in with them. If you click on that link that says Chrism, it's an emoji-based app where kids can kind of rate how they're feeling for the day. Think of when you go to an airport or IKEA used to have these, and you'd go to the restroom, and then when you'd walk out, it'd have the smiley faces, and you smack the button. Same idea, only it's individualized per student, and I can pull up Eric's list and say, oh, Eric's had 4 rough days in a row. Maybe I should go check in with Eric. Or, you know, whatever. Oh, Dr. Lorenz has had 5 great days in a row. I should just give her a fist bump when she walks by. Whatever the case may be. We're just looking for ways to make sure we are checking in with our kids as creatively as possible and just trying to provide some supports. We're going to review and look at some work that has been done in the past. Not saying we're going to do these things, but we are going to look at the work that was done and see kind of where it was, where it is. Is this something we want to revisit as far as mental health screeners and providing supports for kids and things like that? We're going to continue to look for partnerships in the community. 1 in 5 is one organization that we want to look into. There's a mental health directory that I've linked in. You mentioned the consulates, that type of thing. We want, if there are community resources and community partners that are willing to work with us, by all means, we're going to reach out and do our best to partner with them. And that's kind of where we are with social emotional supports. I think it's super important. I think we need to find a way to keep it moving, and that's what we've got.
Jesse, just one question. Excuse me, just one question. I was trying to find it in here. I know that we have some kind of a program for young people on the autism spectrum to give them support and skill building. I couldn't find it in here. Is it something a little different, or did I miss it?
I have no idea, to be honest with
Okay.
you. So some of these
Only that
things,
we have
like,
something.
I'm sure we do. I just don't know what it is called. So I don't know where it would fall on this slide. You can see when we look at all these programs, each building has a lot of different things
Right.
going on.
Right.
So off the top of my head, I don't know which
Okay.
one of those things that would fall under, but that sounds right. And I've heard folks refer to that and talk to that program. We do have an adapted PE type club. We work with a lot of our kids with autism, and they set, like this year, they put on a putt-putt competition. Mr. Fry was the winner. He's very happy to tell people that. They put on a dance. They invite us over. I know Mr. Broadwater's been over and been part of that group.
Yeah.
What's really neat about that is we have high school kids acting as mentors and working directly with other students
Right.
that have different needs. And it's really outstanding to see. If you ever have an opportunity to get in there during that time, I would highly recommend it. So that may be what you're referring to. Off the top of my head, I don't know. But what's really happy, or what makes me smile, is the fact that we have all of these things on these lists, enough of them to where I can't just name them all off on the top of my head.
That's fine.
But those are things we definitely want to keep growing.
Part of what triggered it was the amount of peer mentorship that's in evidence here.
Yeah.
And we have this program at Xavier that's built on exactly that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
we think it's really had some impact. And we've been wondering
Yeah.
about it at the high school level. And
Yep.
again, I'm aware that there's something, I just don't know the details.
Yeah.
of doing
I am
it.
sure that's
Or before.
Yeah, I am sure that's the program you're referring to. But to your point, when you look through all these slides, when you have a minute, you'll see some sort of mentoring program on.
Yeah,
They
right.
have different names. One of them's called like Tiger Paws, one of them's called Tiger Check-In, whatever the case may be. But the mentor piece is big, and even Hope Squad and Junior Hope Squad are based on a mentor-y type relationship. So yes, that's something again, our kids are an awesome resource. We're really lucky here. We have awesome kids. How can we utilize that resource?
Yeah, when I talk about the program at X with people not directly involved in it, half the story is really about the mentors
Yeah.
and
Oh, for sure.
growth that they go through personally. It's just, if you get a chance to spend some time with people that do that kind of work, it's some of the most inspiring
Yeah.
moments I think you'll be exposed to.
Yep. Good stuff for sure. Any other thoughts or questions?
A few things. So I guess I would start with, I know that everyone is running thin from the board office down through every single building in the district. And I don't need an answer right now. What supports do you need from us? What can we do to help with that? Not just for our students, but for our teachers, our staff, for everybody. I know that we'll do anything we can within our power to help provide additional supports that are needed. So again, like I said, I know I don't expect an answer to that right now, but
Yeah, no, I
here of
appreciate that.
things, I don't think anybody up here would disagree with that. And then you were talking about reaching out for partnerships. Just throwing an idea out there. I know that I've spoken to several community members. I know Mr. Broadwater has as well, and other board members who have great backgrounds and information and resources. What about having a community meeting focused on mental health of people who can attend and offer up resources and suggestions where we all work together? So that's just an idea. And then I was just trying to think of if there are any districts that are doing anything that's noteworthy. Do we partner, do any of the psychologists from Children's come into our buildings on a regular basis and see students?
Yes, we have, when you look at this list, it'll say somewhere. But yes, in each of our buildings, actually, all of our buildings, we have folks come in and they are part of the teams and they see students on a one-on-one basis. And then when we do our meeting, that is one of the things we do. If we have students, Children's Home of Cincinnati, that we need to recommend for therapy or for support, we do that. We connect the parents. We help them make sure all the paperwork is set up. If it's going to happen during the school day, which is typically how it plays out, we make sure there's a space and a time, and we build that into their day and into their schedule as much as we can. So those partnerships, we're really happy with what that looks like.
You said with
Obviously,
Children's Home or?
that is through,
Cincinnati Children's?
so that's through Children's Home is who we contract that with. So that is who we do our therapy, in-school-based therapy with, and that's who our partner is on that.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
But we do have some
Put out
students. yeah.
incorrect information.
Yeah.
And then also you said 1 in 5 students are experiencing a mental health concern. You know, what year was that information from? 'Cause I imagine if it's not-
2019, according to a 2019 report by whoever. It's linked up there.
Okay, sorry, we were.
That's okay.
Through it quickly,
Yep.
so I didn't know.
Yep, so that's
yeah, I'm
it's on
sure,
2019.
as we all know, COVID has had a
Sure.
great effect on mental health,
Yep.
and we want to make sure we're not missing anything. So I think the programs and supports we have in place are great, but obviously everybody in this room agrees and in the district that we really need to reach the kids affected by all the changes that they've gone through and all the different things they've missed out on or experiences that they've had. And we want to make sure that we're noticing the kids that are going unnoticed with their
Yep.
struggles.
Yep. So there are ways, like we are looking right now, we are working with Stanford University, or a student at Stanford University, and he has developed an app where the kiddos, again, the example I mentioned, you click on an emoji and then he has algorithms set up and different data where we can try to check in. Our goal is to not miss any kiddos. Some kids can come to school and be sad as can be, but can sit and smile, especially now if they're wearing a mask, hide that and play school really well. So what we're trying to do is figure out how can we ask them? Like ultimately, that's what it boils down to me. Like, let's ask them directly and then figure out what that means. How do we provide the support? How do we extend upon that? You know, and we know when you're going to try something different and something a little more creative like that, there are going to be growing pains with it. Is the app always going to work? Are kids just clicking on random things? So there's going to be some growing pains, but that's okay. That's part of getting better, fail forward, as they say, that type of thing. And we embrace that, and we're looking forward to that. And that's just one way we're kind of looking at trying to creatively making sure we're hitting all the kids. Ultimately, it's going to come down to relationships. If we have a relationship with a kid, with a family, we have a pretty good idea of where they stand. So again, that's what we're really, really pushing. But at the same time, what are some other ways we can try to check in? The universal screeners is something we had discussed in the past. The folks that were here, I know, sat through some Terrace Metrics presentations and conversations, and we're going to kind of revisit some of those. I'm not saying we're going to do them, but we want to revisit some of that work that was done and see if that's a route we want to go. We agree with you completely. And I appreciate you saying that this is an area y'all are going to support and that we just need to reach out and let you know. And we definitely will. Creating an environment where folks want to work is a huge part of that. And offering up supports in these types of areas goes a long way in that. So thank you for that.
And I know Dr. Lorenz mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that parents and community members came together and brought the teachers some treats today. So I think that was a great lift me up. And
I was going to end up summarizing that I know that in the past, it has been a little less prevalent during the pandemic, but we have a pretty good tradition in Loveland of having either PTA groups or parent groups or school counselor groups providing opportunities for community members, for parents to come together on specific issues around mental health, around the well-being of their students. And I would assume that we would eventually get back to that tradition of offering those kinds of things. I know that I have been involved in meetings. There have been lots of opportunities for parents to come and, guardians, grandparents to help their students to join with the school and take care of our kids.
Just a couple last comments. First of all, thank you to Mr. Coles. I think you can see he's a student-centered gentleman, and we are lucky to have him guiding Pupil Services. And I think you can also see there's a lot that he covers. He's a pretty responsible gentleman here with a lot of things, with special ed, with mental health. Mental health, we've been discussing quite a bit through the whole pandemic. I don't think any of us know how it's affected kids. I don't think we know how it's affected adults. And I think as we move through it, that's what makes a lot of our decisions difficult, is we are trying to balance the mental health and making things normal as we can throughout this whole pandemic. And what I can tell you is, I asked Mr. Coles to do this simply for me. It's a great way, number one for me, not for me, but a great way, kind of an audit of everything that he does. And I can see what we have in the district, what do we do for kids, and where do we want to go from here. So when we start talking about the strategic vision, you have to do an audit. You have to know what we do and where are we going. And the other part of it is, we do need to hear from our kids, and there will be a student survey at some point that Ms. Connor will discuss, and we need to see where our kids are. And I think the CRISM is a good way to get started. We met with this young man, and it's just a quick check-in for kids, but at least knowing where our kids are is important. The mental health is important, as we all know, and as parents, that's always a concern. So I thank Mr. Coles for all that information. It's a lot. There's a lot in there, but I think it's a great way for us to see what's going on for our kiddos. So thank you.
One other thing, you're talking about how, excuse me, how helpful that is for you, it is for us, but also for parents in our different buildings. And I think particularly because there's been so much misinformation and disinformation out there around social emotional learning.
Yes.
And talking to a second grade teacher, and she was talking about a parent that was wanting to opt her child out of doing social emotional learning because of the concern she had. And then she explained to her what the worksheet was. Let me tell you about what we did today. And it was a worksheet helping them think about how they process their emotions. And when the mom heard what specifically they were doing, she said, oh, no, that sounds good. I'm glad to have my child participate in that. And so, if we can take these lists too and share those in those specific buildings with parents to say, this is inspiring to think about all of these support services we have. And then also, as Eileen said, to have parents in those buildings thinking about their own specific kids, their own specific expertise. Where are other layers? What are other things we can do to build upon this to continue to increase the support for our kids? Because as comprehensive as this is, we know that the needs are just going to continue to grow coming out of this pandemic.
It's a great point. As far as educating the whole community, we receive emails. There are a lot of individuals in the district that are very knowledgeable, and so it's important for us to listen and provide that information and communication. So it's a good point.
I just wanted to say, and it kind of transitions from what you were saying, if we don't already, or do we already, maybe is where I should start, have the provider directory that you have linked available on our website somewhere where parents and families can access it, should they need the mental health support information?
I'll let Jesse talk on that.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you go to our website now and you go to the COVID hub or the COVID home, we do have a list by building of different resources that the building counselors recommend. We can talk to Mr. Setters about maybe making that a little more prevalent and easier to get to, but that's something Mr. Broadwater asked us to put together earlier in the school year. So I worked with the buildings and worked with Mr. Setters to get that posted to our website. And I can tell you via email, I've referenced folks there, and through phone conversations with people as we were talking on the phone, we went ahead and worked through that list a little bit. So we're trying our best to make sure folks have access to the information. But sometimes a reminder of making sure we put it in a spot that's super easy to find is good. So thank you for that. And I'll definitely just see if we can make sure that's in a nice, easy to find location.
Thank
Yeah.
you. No, it's a lot of information, and I think our buildings and Mr. Coles and our counselors do a great job, and I would just encourage any parent, or if there are any students watching, if you have any problems or concerns, to reach out to the buildings, to reach out to a principal, a teacher, a counselor, anybody, and they can get the appropriate support that's needed.
I would just say, I think you've got a big, important job. When I first got involved in the school board, and I started to see that, I don't know, I'll use a round number, 15% of our kids are, getting some kind of service, some kind of accommodation in some cases, right? I was shocked by the high percentage, and tonight you went through kind of the whole spectrum of issues that you deal with, and kind of programs that you manage to help mitigate and grow through those issues. So there's a lot of stuff here, and I hope the community has a chance to listen to the breadth and the depth of the things that you're leading here. So important stuff.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys and all that you do and your time. And I will let Mr. Broadwater take us back to the next topic.
All right.
Before you go, Mr. Coles, I wanted to thank you from the board. You don't have to reply to any of this. Just wanted to say I went back to your first slide, and I'm glad that you have all those folks supporting you, because it's a big job. So it's good to go back and remember that you have a lot of people on your team. So thank you.
Do you want us to do a cheer as you walk away?
All right. Mr. Broadwater, we're moving to School Board Recognition Month. You want me to do that real fast? You're going to say something?
I'm going to say something.
Okay.
Speaking of important jobs, and I know public servants never like to be called out, but I'm going to call you out right now. And Reverend Eilert, it's been 3 weeks now, so we're going to say we appreciate you for school board recognition. But I think it's important that everybody understands just how important this role is. And I can tell you personally, I know when I text or call, I'm going to get a response, and I know it's going to be in the best interest of every student. And that's important. And I appreciate it very, very much. The amount of work that goes in. I joke about Reverend Eilert, but he has already had to spend numerous hours with me and calls, and I enjoy going back and forth, and it's always a respectful conversation with all of our board members, and so I thank you. I've got a little something written up here, so I'm going to read it. And I would like to take this opportunity to recognize our outstanding board members during School Board Recognition Month. We value our board members for their dedicated service to the district, students, staff, and community of Loveland. the work that you do each and every day, when I say each and every day, it is each and every day. I'm not sure people understand. But even if it's not talking to me, if that's a lucky day for you, that means you're reading articles and anything that doing data collection and looking at how you can help our kids. So it is each and every day, especially with this incredibly challenging obstacle called a pandemic. But what you do has a direct impact on every student that we serve. Your perspective and expertise guide our administration making the best decisions for each and every child, and I appreciate it. The countless hours you take out of your days to ensure our district is able to provide the best education possible is very much appreciated by all of us, and I know I speak for the rest of my team and my staff, and we look forward to working together to create the best opportunities for Loveland's kids. And so I thank you. What you have is an orange bag with a little memento in it. You have a certificate of recognition. And I think that the items that you'll appreciate the most would be, I want to thank Mrs. Gehring, our principal at the LECC. She had some young kids do some thank you cards, and that's always fun to read through and see what they think Board of Educations really do, if they know, because some of us still don't, I guess. But I do want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything you do for our kids. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. And I will, I don't know if people will be able to see in the audience, but I'll hold up one of the cards that we got. It says thank you. This one on the back says, yay, you. So that's really good. We do appreciate that. That's a very nice recognition. Thank you, Mrs. Broadwater.
You're welcome.
Moving on.
Back to it.
Now back to work. Moving along, first of all, you'll see the next item is reports. And as usual, you have administrator reports on your agenda. I noticed just now that we do not have student reports this evening, but I'm sure we will next month. And then we move to the board president report. We have had lots of reporting this evening, so I'm going to be fairly short with my report and then ask board members if they have anything.
Our student reps, just so you know, were not able to make it. I believe Austin had bowling and what was ACT prep or something like so. They're there. I did the last board meeting. You had asked for the digital, so we're going to move forward with that when they're here next time. So we'll have the digital copy of what they say.
Okay, thank you.
Without creating new work for them.
Correct. Yeah, they've got it anyhow. We just need to get it.
Okay, thank you very much. The only thing that I have on my report this time is I wanted to briefly speak to the board, as I had mentioned before, about our policy efforts. And I just want to quickly review that we currently have 469 policies. Many thanks to Mr. Broadwater and Mr. Giuffre for helping to review the current state of our policies and possible actions to bring our policies into order and compliance. As an aside, I just want to say that it's getting pretty serious with policy when I have a dream about policy. And I dreamed that we had decided we were going to tackle 5 policies a month. And if you look at this, I believe that turns out to be 8 years of board work if we do 5 a month.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It actually was kind of a nightmare, yes. Just a little history. Loveland first kept paper copies of policies in a large binder, about this big. And we worked primarily on our own to keep those policies up to date. We then contracted with OSBA and regularized policies according to their format. Then most recently, we contracted with Neola to bring policies into their current format and to keep them updated. Neola charges $750 annually for the policy platform that allows district bylaws and policies to reside in board docs and be linked to our website. We also paid $1,295 semi-annually for Neola's update service, which is regular updates based on current laws that are enacted. We have 2 current agreements with Neola that are attached for you in board docs. These are an audit of current policies and a catch-up agreement concerning administrative guidelines needed to accompany our policies. And those are based on an hourly rate for Neola personnel. The reason I'm suggesting that the board consider a different process or an additional process for updating and maintaining our policies is that I don't believe that we are currently working up to capacity. When we started the Neola update of policies, this is the first half, and this is what needs to be updated or changed. That's just the first half of them. The administrative guidelines catch-up is not quite we're not quite sure where it is. It's very difficult to nail down, and we really need to get the administrative guidelines attached to our policies. So I am suggesting, because, and this came also from Mr. Broadwater and Mr. Giuffre, a possibility that our law firm, one of our law firms, Ennis Britton, has indicated an ability to assist the district with determining the optimal number of policies that the district needs, which ones are required by law, and which ones of those are in need of updating. It is our feeling that this would significantly reduce the number of policies. It would reduce duplicative policies. There would be some policies that do not need to be policies. We currently have some policies that are actually more like administrative guidelines. So if we could reduce those and then work on the work, bringing to the board any policies that need to be updated, need to be revised, and then immediately begin work on getting those administrative guidelines where they need to be for our administrators. I don't think everybody at this table has heard me say my opinion about policy is that it could be quite minimal and could be quite simplistic. We could just have a policy that says the Loveland City School District will follow all local, state, and federal laws, because that's what many of our policies are. They are explaining how we follow laws. That would be my utopia of a policy. I have been convinced that what we need in the district are sufficient policies that allow us to do our work so that we don't have to research in the law every issue that comes up. We have policies that generally tell us how to abide by law. And so this is my recommendation, that the board consider this. What would happen first would be a review by Ennis Britton. Those policies would then come through the superintendent's policy committee to the board members. Nothing would be done with the policies without the full review and acceptance of the board. And I have, I believe, through Mr. Giuffre, a notice of this work would not exceed, the Ennis Britton work would not exceed $10,000. Probably less than that. It would be based on an hourly rate of the work that they would do for us. There's not, I don't believe it's needed that we have a resolution to do that, but like perhaps some feedback from the board that we could continue. And then once we finish that discussion, if there are board members who have additional board member reports for this time, it would be great. So thoughts?
The only thought I had with Ennis Britton, and I know that we've discussed this, obliquely previously in the last meeting, was what is their cost per hour significantly different than Neola's cost per hour? And do they offer us significantly different services than Neola would be able to offer us?
I can speak to that.
Mr. Giuffre?
There's two different charges that are in the contracts that are on board docs for Neola. That would be Tom Durbin, our relationship manager. One is 80, one's 100, but it's a different type of service because the policies are developed by attorneys, and he's simply facilitating it as a prototype document. What Mr. Stedronsky would be doing for us is actually identifying whether or not there is a need for the policy at all, and then if there is a need for any customization of those policies. Thank you. It would be based upon Loveland City Schools and not just a generic template from Neola. The idea also is just to better be able to manage and reference a policy manual that represents Loveland City Schools much more efficiently. When we have policies, typically we call and ask for an interpretation of what it says sometimes because it's very voluminous. I think it's more of an operational efficiency, but Gary's, Mr. Stedronsky's services are uniquely different because he is an attorney. Mr. Durbin is a relationship manager for Neola.
And so the kind of the follow-up question that the assumption then is that would be more expensive per hour just because he's a different person, but it would offer us something that we're not necessarily getting, which is a unique interpretation of the value of that policy rather than a pass-through of what's been recommended. Am I right? Is that a fair?
Mr. Stedronsky's hourly rate is more than Mr. Durbin. I want to say it's probably about 200, around there, 200, 235 up to that. But then he is using interns to do the grunt work, to parse and go through. on his direction. So he's overseeing the project, and that's how he intended to keep the costs down. I don't know what the interns make.
And then so the second question is, obviously in the name of operational efficiency, it's worth spending some money up front to get there. What is the challenge? Because at least in my time on the board, Neola has continued to feed us to keep us updated. What is then the challenge of keeping policies updated after we've switched systems?
I would just say that in my experience of going through this back when we had the binder and all of that, is that we work very hard to maintain our policies. And we find ourselves at a point where we're kind of starting with a project, a big project, because there's been a lag in maintaining them. 469 policies is a lot. On top of that, where I think the most focus needs to be is the guidelines. And we find ourselves having put a lot of work into guidelines, but not really having a functional guideline. And ultimately, for me, as a practitioner, those are our processes, and that's what I focus on. And so the policies are, as much of a big project as it is really to give the administration the opportunity to get to the guidelines and make sure that our processes are vetted in.
And then, I'm sorry, I totally agree with all of this, but then the second thing is, in Kathy's utopia, our policy is 2 lines. If we work towards getting too close to that, how much challenge do we come up with later when we need to go back and refer to those policies?
Well, actually, Mr. Stedronsky has a very similar philosophy, because much of what is in policy is in law. And so when the law changes, the policies have to change. And those updates that come from Neola are nothing more than a reflection of those laws. So by consolidating it down to what we actually need in order to be able to functionally operate, I think Mr. Stedronsky's vision is very similar to what Dr. Lorenz's vision is, which is to be able to streamline, be efficient, and as far as any consequences from that, I would certainly hope that legal counsel wouldn't leave us liable.
I would just add to that I know that Ennis Britton does work with Neola. And certainly we have used Ennis Britton in the past when there have been questions with a Neola policy and we want to do something. Neola does tell you that if you vary from their wording in their policy, then they don't warrant it any longer. And so then we generally go to Ennis Britton and say, if we do this, do we still have a legal policy? I am not sure if we go through this process, I'm not sure that we wouldn't stay with Neola numbering and might, through Ennis Britton, use the Neola updates to make sure that anything is updated when it needs to be, as well as perhaps an Ennis Britton biannual or annual review of what we need to add.
I'll just share a frustration. I was trying to update our credit card policy. And I was told by our relationship manager, oh, it's in there in drafts. And it really wasn't. It was something that needed to be built, constructed, because there's a lot of legal requirements in there that Mr. Stedronsky brought to my attention. So as we review our processes and the needs, there are certain things legally in state law that Mr. Stedronsky is very much more aware of than our relationship manager with Neola. John Britton is the one who began the relationship with Neola. And then I think it's Holly Reedy who's maintained language with them, at least some of her work. I also think Pam Leist has also done that work. So we're represented well all the way around. This is just making it fit better for us because 469 policies is over the top.
I can tell you, having sat with Mr. Gerben for a few hours, there's redundancy is probably there's a lot of redundancy in there, and you want to kind of make it a little bit more succinct. And if you have policy, you want to make sure you know what that policy is. And more importantly, you have an administrative guideline that's attached to it so that we know how to proceed. So I think the updates, I would agree with you. I think once we have the meat of what we need, then the updates coming from Neola makes sense. Run it past your legal to make sure that's what you need and that's what represents Loveland. And it fits into our guidelines, or if you have to update your guidelines. But there was a lot of redundancy as we went through it.
One of the challenges with redundancies too is that it can end up leading to contradictions, because if it's a redundancy, you change it in the one spot, not change in the other. Now you've got 2 different sets of dates, 2 different.
And that's a great point, because if you don't have the policy, it is one thing, but if you don't follow the policies you have, there's no really difference in the two. So that's a great point. Being better able to follow what we have and understand what it is. Yeah.
Mr. Doherty.
So I don't know if it's going to sound weird, but the number of times I've read a policy, and it's been numerous times since I've been here, I'm not sure I've ever learned anything. Sorry to say. We've got this behemoth of a policy manual. If you were to print it out, it's all online, but if you were to print it out, it'd be huge. And it exists for the sake of existing. I don't think it serves anybody in any particularly useful way. When you read it, and you basically read the same policy 4 times to the redundancy comment, because the same policy appears under administrative, and I don't remember the other categories, but essentially the same thing. And you read the same thing over and over and over again, says the same thing. And when you look at it, it's like, if you can read through the legalese, it's just common sense. It says what you would expect it to say based on what we all kind of understand law to be on innumerable issues. So the thing is there, in my opinion, today, for largely, not exclusively, there's one other category here, but largely for legal purposes. It's a statement of kind of interpretations of law as it applies to various circumstances in our business, if you will. And to that end, it sure seems like this thing could be condensed down to, a tenth of what it is today. There is a separate type of policy, and it's what I would call policy of intent. It would be where we have decided to issue policy on a particular subject. The most recent one would have been DEI, for example. Not really a legal thing. All the legal aspects of that are covered elsewhere in the policy manual. But this was a statement of our commitment and our intent around a variety of, in this case, social issues. And we've got a few of those in there, which, probably my earlier comments don't apply to that. I think there's a point in having those policies, a very different point, because it influences our behavior. The other one is kind of behaviors that we shouldn't maybe be doing, and that's where the law comes in. So I think we've got, this behemoth that just kind of feeds on itself today. It's just going to suck down money, attention, and time unless we find a better way to do it. I don't know where this process leads us, because I'm troubled by the same things I think that Eric mentioned a minute ago, which is if you kind of come off of Neola, is Ennis Britton going to take care of updating a policy that's kind of the skinny version of policy? I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work, but I think it's something that's worth doing, and we'll figure out our direction as we have more information, I think.
And I would simply say, you mentioned the notion of DEI, and I know that what happened as we looked at that is we looked at policies that we had that spoke to what we were talking about and didn't actually add a policy to the manual. We said that we had the language that we wanted there, and we came up with a DEI statement instead of a policy. So I think there may be other things in the policy manual that are like that, and we want to
You're right.
clarify some kind of statement as opposed to making it a policy. On the other hand, I will say that I know that we have a number of policies that we have simply because the law says you will do X and you will create a policy that says you will do X. So that's what I'm hoping Ennis Britton will tell us is these are the policies that the law says you must have, and here is the form in which you can have them so that you refer to the law that says you have the policy, but that the guidelines actually tell you how you're going to follow that law, instead of having this whole big policy that's, 10 or 12 pages that basically repeats the law, but doesn't tell you how you're going to enforce it.
And I think something that is a philosophical issue or a practical issue for this body might better reside under bylaws.
I know that's confusing sometimes to the public. They'll say, you have a bylaw, and I'll say, no, that's a policy. And they'll say, well, it says on your website you have bylaws. And well, we have bylaws, but we have policies. two different things. So I would hope that this would be some work that would help us feel a little bit better about the future of our policy instead of now, as Mr. Doherty says, it's just this big thing that's kind of taken over. It has its own life and it is rolling down the hill gathering moss and we can't keep up with it. So,
Yeah, and you've mentioned both of you have mentioned administrative guidelines. And I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I would imagine it's more kind of non-legalese. This is the way we do things.
Right.
These are the things that we intend to put into writing about operating the district in certain ways.
Process and procedures, how we're going to move forward with the policy.
And that's,
it's kind of a cycle that grows. You have this law that says you'll have this policy, so you have this policy, and the policy says, and the superintendent will create administrative guidelines for this policy. And so it's got a kind of a growth feature of its own.
It's like the credit card policy. The credit card policy is the board authorizing the district to use credit cards, purchase cards. And then I've got a manual this thick for the users to sign off on with forms. And I can maintain that on an ongoing basis as necessary, but the policy is the policy.
so I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No.
Okay, so you're asking for concurrence, spending maybe up to 10 grand with the attorneys to start to dive into the policy area for us.
I'm suggesting that I think that would be a good thing to do, unless I hear from board members that there's a better way or another way, or you'd prefer not to enter kind of work. I saw some
I'm
nods.
okay with
I'm
it.
supportive of it.
Yeah, I saw some nods. Okay. And then at some point, it will come back to you in a form that will need to be formally approved by the board, but hopefully it won't be a book this big.
Hopefully we won't have dreams about it.
I'll just have the
I'll
nightmares.
include a progress report as we go forward. Well, for you to provide a progress report so that we know where we are in the process.
Okay, very good. Are there any other things that the board would like to mention during this board report time? I have some documents up here. I'm not going to report on them, but I have some Great Oaks documents. I have the Great Oaks Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, if you'd like to see it. It's called a CAFR. Loveland does not have to produce one, but it's a very good financial document. I have a study that was done through the UC Economics Center on return on investment from the Great Oaks work that they do. And I have the January Spotlight on Students, where you can see the work placement that many of our students have had. So if anyone would like to see these documents, I have them for you. That's the rest of my report. Anybody else have anything to report?
I only just have a quick update on the Planning Commission. The next meeting is at 6:30 PM on Wednesday, February 2nd. They had a couple things on their agenda, and I have it here. I'll bring it up. Review the extracurricular activities analysis and essentially how we're spending on extracurriculars in the school district. They've been ongoing analyzing the costs of the different programs, what's covered by pay for play and pay for participate fees, and what's covered by the district. Review a recommendation to purchase and install a facility management system, and that's a little bit of the transition planning as Mr. Ames eventually someday may retire. And then the third one is discuss the commission organization and future opportunities for the commission. So that's coming up 6:30 PM, February 2nd.
And Mr. Giuffre, will you take care of I did notice you had mentioned it in an email or a text to me, and I checked. It's not on the website yet, but I think Mr. Giuffre can take care of making sure that notice goes out to anyone who it needs to be notified of board-related meetings. And this is also the meeting where they will discuss, the board had discussed the future organization of the Planning Commission and said that we would not complete our discussion on that until the Planning Commission had a chance to talk about it and get back to us. So after that, I'm sure there will be a report back to us.
And that's my intention, is that we have that conversation then in March.
Okay, very good. We could put that on our to-do list, Mr. Doherty,
We can do
on
that.
our website,
Yeah.
things we're going to do, talk about the Planning Commission in March. We haven't put anything on there for a while. I guess we've not been very busy.
Not for 3 weeks now. We talked about the last one, I
Yes.
think, which was the calendar.
Oh, right.
District activities that would come up for discussion.
Okay, anything else from the board? Then we'll move to Mr. Broadwater and superintendent's updates.
Very good. We'll go ahead and hop into the discussion. And I think Blake's got my presentation. The first thing I would say is thank you to the board. Last week was a difficult week. As you recall, when we were looking at our mitigation policies, we had anticipated the first couple of weeks after the holidays issues. We did not anticipate the issues that the entire nation and state and every other district saw in terms of the numbers. And so all of these decisions weigh very, very heavy. Thank you. Weigh very heavy every day. I can tell you today, the majority of the discussion with myself and our team was that. It's a balance between keeping kids safe and keeping kids safe with their mental health, like Mr. Coles had presented, and trying to make this workable. We've had the same mitigation policies throughout the year, so it keeps the data somewhat empirical, not perfectly clean. And I know there's different ways to go through and take a look at data, but I'm going to go through kind of my thought process where we are and ask for any input that you may have. But the first slide is I went ahead and took the dashboard from the website. And if you notice, this is the week ending last week. So we had 3 days. The 131 total is the highest total that we've seen in any week. If you remember, we were clicking along pretty good where we'd have 5 to 10 positives throughout the week, and everything was going really, really well. The last 2 weeks, so the first week back from the holidays, we had 40 total. Last week, we had 131. So the hope is that the 2-week spike that we had anticipated is 2 weeks. I'm not sure that's going to happen when you listen to the experts and from Hamilton County. I'll get into it a little bit later, but I think we've got a few more weeks that we're going to see some things. We're going to monitor and make sure we're staying on top of things. But when you look at the student positives, you can see they're spread out throughout the buildings. The staff positives, which is the third row there, you can see that you have everywhere from 3 at the LECC to 7 at the elementary school. And so the staff positives, the 29 is the issue. It's not just 29 days, that's 29 individuals. So if they're out for 5 days, you're looking at 145 days. The minimum they're going to be out is 3. So that's 87 days in the classroom. And so it really put a strain on our staff. And if you ask other districts, they would say the same. You saw a lot of districts kind of follow suit after we came out and said that we were going to do asynchronous Thursday and Friday. You saw quite a few districts follow suit in different ways. Just to clarify, there's a way you could call a calamity day. Calamity day is just like a snow day, right? The kids aren't doing work. It's a calamity day. You have asynchronous, which means the work is done asynchronously. It's tough. It's easy for me to say, but let me say remote. The difference is remote and asynchronous. Remote is it would be live. Asynchronous, it is not. We wanted to have the day in between, so we had Wednesday where we could let the parents know that Thursday and Friday we were going to go asynchronous. It allowed our staff to prepare lessons. Mrs. Connor did a great job of working with our staff in terms of just having ELA and English language arts review lesson, have a math lesson. And so we're keeping our kids reviewing and looking at the fundamentals, but we also want to make sure it was not too much of a burden on our parents, as we know we don't want to go down that route ever again. And so that's where we were. When I look at the student positives, I added a little chart underneath there. I just like looking at percents, being the old math guy, but the student positives are the same, 3, 14, 15, 27 going across. The enrollment I put down for each building. So LECC, you have 393 kiddos. Obviously, the largest building is the high school at 1343. So therefore, the percents, the highest percent in regards to the positives was at our intermediate school at 4.07%. Then you had the high school at 3.72, all the way down to the LECC, our smallest building, at 0.76%. So when I look at those percents, I don't see any anomalies sticking out. I don't see anything that is all concerning, but I don't see anything that's sticking out where one building is struggling more than another. And so that's one data point that I look at when we go through this. The next slide that I have there, hopefully you can see it a little bit. And Garth, if you have anything to add, feel free to do that. But the graphic that you see is what Garth looks at every morning. So the green is going to tell you that you have the number of staff, and it's going to be the filled, and then the I guess it would be the yellows, the other part, which would be the unfilled. If you look at January 3rd, we had 78 total staff, and that's not just teachers, that's total. We had 16 unfilled, so we had a 63% fill rate, and that was the very first day back from the holiday break. And so when you're looking at fill rate, what you'd like to be at is 90%. So right out of the gate, we're going, well, 63%, we may have an issue. And so as you go through there, the first week, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, you can see the fill rate. We ended up at 53%. I can see Garth coming up, so he's going to correct something I said. But we're at 53% fill rate at the end on Friday. And then when you look at the following week, which is last week, right out of the gate on the 10th, we were at a 62% fill rate. So the concern was we were going to be right back where we were as we get to Friday, if not worse. And again, we anticipated the 2 weeks. We did not anticipate the number here. And with your staff, the problem with teaching and some of our other staff, if me as the superintendent, if I miss a day, that's okay. You don't need to get somebody to replace me. When you have a teacher that is out, you have to replace that teacher, and that is where it becomes very difficult. You have to have a person with those kids. We don't want to double up classrooms. Now you're adding more kids to the classroom. And so the thought process as we looked at all the data was just that. On today, the hope was it helped, right? And so when you look at today, we had 62 total staff absences, 14 unfilled, 10 of which were teachers. Okay, and 10's not unsurmountable. We can cover that with existing staff. And the fill rate was up to 70%. So was it a massive increase? No. Did it help? Absolutely. It also helped our staff. There were a lot of student absences. It helped our staff kind of get everybody back on the same page, reset, and we're ready to go for this week as we proceed. And Garth, I'll let you pop in there.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to mention, Mr. Broadwater, is that if you're looking at these numbers and you're looking at let's just go to 1-3, the very top, 78 total absences for the district, 16 unfilled with a fill rate of 63%. With those two numbers, you don't get the 63%. And that is because, and I think Mr. Broadwater touched on it, there are some positions that there isn't a sub needed for. For example, let's say that a principal is out, or there is a school counselor that is out. There isn't a sub available to be the counselor. So if it's not a classroom teacher, that's why I just wanted to make sure if you guys were trying to do the math for the fill rate, that the number of positions that there isn't a sub needed is what is the missing piece there for you to be able to figure that piece out. That's all.
Thank you.
As you can see, this is a struggle for us. This is a daily struggle. And as you could see, it's a struggle for many area districts around us, and coming up with different ideas on how they could try to get some relief from some of these things.
Garth, let them know where you subbed last week.
No, well, I mean, I was at the high school some, and it just, the number of unfilleds. So if you look up there and you can see where the number of unfilled classrooms started to increase, we were really just trying to do everything we could to make sure that we were covering classrooms with kids. It was a lot of fun to go and to sub, but you know, my days of AP honors physics are long gone. And I have to tell you, I wasn't much help for some of these students. These kids knew a whole lot more about their content than I did. But it was good. I had some advanced English classes and some physics classes and some government class. So it was quite the array.
Say that you learn more when you teach something than when someone is teaching it to you. So you probably did them a favor, letting them teach you
Oh, yeah.
honors.
Yeah, there was one gentleman who was taking a quiz and he raised his hand, and I had known him from him being at the intermediate school. So I had a relationship with him, and he raised his hand. I went over and I said, "Hey man, can I help you?" And he said, "Yeah, this was the physics class, which was pretty high level." And I was looking at the problem and I was kind of reading it, and he kind of looked at me and he said, "If you don't know how to do this, it's okay." And I said, "Okay." I wasn't much help, but it was good. And really, I've got to tell you, it's not me covering a classroom. I covered a bell a couple of times. It was really nothing. But what this is doing to our staff in every building is there are multiple people covering multiple times a day and lots of different. And it runs the gamut between teachers helping, administrators helping. And, we're trying to keep kids in school, and we want school to be in session. We're going to try to do everything we can to do that.
Garth, two quick questions, or Mike, I don't know.
Sure.
Whoever wants to answer it, but we're seeing, call it 60 to 70% fill rates right now. For context, pre-pandemic, what would that number be?
I would say you'd want to be in the 90th percentile or above. Garth, I'll let you speak to.
Yeah, I did that very thing. Looking back, let's not take a look at, of course, this was very concerning, but what's just a norm? Typically, pre-pandemic here in Loveland, we are 90s or higher. Low for us would be like mid-80s.
Okay. The other question is who can sub? I've seen some social media traffic. I've seen some emails, et cetera, with parents volunteering and others volunteering. What's the reality around that? What can be, what could the community do to help?
Right.
Anything?
So the Ohio Department of Education has loosened it a little bit simply because they know every district is experiencing this. I was able to, I had met a gentleman earlier in the year for coffee to discuss some things, and lo and behold, he contacted me and said he wanted to help, and we've got him in as a substitute teacher, and we showed that on social media to let our parents know that they're more than welcome to join us. But they also, Garth, I know, had a meeting this discuss some things, but if you want to expand on it.
Well, just a couple of things. If people are wanting to help and they are unsure about what to do, other than going to the HR section of the website, if you would just remember the name Judy McDaniel and/or my name, Garth Collier, you can simply just connect with us, email us, and then we get the information to folks and we get the ball rolling to try to get them in the classroom as quickly as we can. The piece that Mr. Broadwater had mentioned that the state had kind of loosened their requirements. Traditionally, there's been a requirement that you have to have a bachelor's degree to be able to be a substitute teacher. That has been lifted for the year, so there could be other folks who are then eligible to sub, and that has helped us quite a bit with some of our new subs.
So is there any particular qualification that a member of the public would have to have?
No, they have to be able to pass a background check. So they have to get their BCI and their fingerprints, and that's something we handle in the HR office. We work through Hamilton County ESC called Sub Solutions. So there's some paperwork they have to fill out there. And then other than that, and then applying for their substitute license through ODE. But all those things are things that, my office where Judy can walk people through and get that done pretty quickly.
So Garth, the changes instead of the bachelor degree requirement, it's been loosened a little bit.
Correct.
But presumably they'd have to have the confidence that they have command enough of the subject matter to be able to.
Yeah, absolutely. What we do is, I work and talk with them about what are their experiences, what they're comfortable with, what age of kids, those kind of things, making sure that we get them lined up in the most appropriate place.
So this could be a discussion if the public is listening in tonight or in the next couple of days where you would entertain more volunteers.
I would love to have 50 emails in my inbox when I get home tonight. That would be great.
And I'd like to pitch in two things. One, thank you to all the community members who've reached out to support when they saw these numbers and what this was going to lead to. All of us want our children to be in school, and right now we need extra help to do that. So thank you to anyone who's offered to do that or reached out to do it or tell people about the opportunities. And the second one is, although the process doesn't sound challenging, what's the lead time between my interest of saying, Garth, I'd like to do this, and me actually being able to be in a classroom?
We're probably looking at around 2 weeks to be able to start the process. if there's no issue with the fingerprinting and background check, that goes relatively quickly. The process for the sub-license through ODE, I get those messages daily when folks fill out the information, and then it prompts me to have to go into a system to approve them. Really, a couple of weeks. So somebody is really interested in doing it. We set up the meetings right away. We get the ball rolling, and we try to get them in as soon as possible.
That could be the bigger challenge, though, if you think this peak.
Timing.
Well, and to go back, even if you think, well, in 2 weeks, things will be better, which we all hope, it's better to have a pool of people who are pre-vetted and ready to go than to try to respond as we've been doing.
That's a great point. Now, Dr. Schwarzenau, in the springtime of last year, I would have told you that I knew that we weren't going to be finished dealing with the pandemic. But to be in the place that we're in now, I was naive thinking that we wouldn't be in the spot that we are in now. And there is really no harm in being signed up and then, let's say, choosing not to do it, but then at a later time, you already have everything in place and you're on the list. And when they choose to be able to want to work, they're already ready to go. That's a great point.
I would echo what Garth was saying in regards to our staff has really stepped up. On Thursday and Friday, I got the opportunity, which was nice, to be able to go into each building and stop in and talk to our staff individually. It's something I haven't really been able to do at length. And just the stories I've heard about who's covering who and how they covered, and somebody was a half-time employee who stayed all day and covered, and I appreciate that. And I will tell you, Garth has done yeoman's work to get all of these classes covered. Our administrators, our administrative staff have done a great job. Everybody stopped into classrooms. One evening, Garth texted me and said, "Hey, Mike, I need you to cover AP English." 5 minutes later, he said, "No, I found somebody better for AP English." That was a good move on your part, Garth, but we got to teach a little art, but it was good. And
This is my first lap around the track, Mike. I knew that we should probably find something else for you to do.
That was a veteran move, Garth. Yep. So, but thank you for all your hard work. The next slide that I have is we've had people asking for the attendance. I gave you the printout. I know that's kind of hard to see up there. So on the printout, if you notice on January 3rd, we had 8.4% student absence, which is, you're in the winter months, so 10 to 15 to 20%, you're going to see sometimes, depending if the flu is going around or bronchitis or whatever it may be. So on the 3rd, we had 8.4% student absence. 4th was 9.9%. 5th was 10%. The 6th was 11.4%. And 7th was 12.2%. So you could see kind of a bad pattern going on there as it seemed to increase as we went through the week. So we were interested to see where we were with the 10th. On the 10th, we had 14% absent. On the 11th, 14.6%. And then the 12th, it was 17.4%. And then today, which we were hoping the attendance would get better with the little respite we had, and it did. It went down to 10% absent in the schools. So that's another data point that we look at, knowing that the columns I have on there, we have the total absent, then we have students quarantined, just so that we're aware of how many students are out because of COVID and how many are out because it's wintertime or they've got something else going on. So that would be one set of data that we look at. The next slide that I threw up here was I took a little snippet of January 12th, since it was the highest that we had. And you can see at LECC, we had 33 students quarantined. And if you take your percentage out of 393 students, that gives you 8.4% percentage out due to COVID. So the column to the right I've added so you can kind of see what percent is out due to COVID. So 8.4% at LECC, which again, it's a smaller enrollment, so the percent's a little bit skewed there. You have 8.39% at LPS, 9.64 at LIS. For whatever reason, the intermediate school had some tough days last week. You have 3.55% at LMS, and at LHS, you have 5.73%. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a snapshot of the percent that are out due to COVID in each building. And again, I know it's a snapshot. I know there's anomalies in there, but that's pretty indicative of what we've seen throughout the year. It's been very well, not very like any of it, but it's been pretty evenly dispersed throughout all of our buildings. So with student attendance, that's what we have in regards to looking at the data.
Mike,
Mike,
before you move
Mike,
off of that.
Can I,
Yep, go ahead.
can I ask
Go
a
ahead,
question?
sure.
Just, I understand why the numbers don't match up, that we would have student positive cases, but we'd still have students who were quarantined from previous positive cases. So I'm getting that. What I want to ask about is remind me what that zero, back in the first or early slide, that zero student close contacts quarantines means. So
Good question.
we have a quarantine that happens, but it's not, according to this chart, from student close contact.
So what had happened, if you remember, CDC and our Department of Health, Ohio Department of Health, changed the quarantine guidelines. So right now, what we have said all year is our goal is to keep kids in school. We can do that pretty well right now because the only kids that are out are the positives because the quarantine guidelines have changed. So now we don't have any close contacts. What we have is self-monitoring. They have to wear the mask, they come in, they're self-monitoring. So we don't have anybody quarantined. So that's
We're still reporting close contacts to people that if we have them, but they don't have to quarantine if they're wearing masks or if they're, some other reasons they don't have to quarantine. Close contacts would be reported. This zero means we have no quarantine because of a close contact.
correct. Yes. And I can tell you that you're seeing other districts get away from even doing close contact tracing because it is voluminous right now. It is overtaking what our administrators and our nurses and health aides are doing because it's just so much. We don't feel like that's what we want to do. If we want to keep kids as safe as possible, I think we need to let families know. I will say our community has done a phenomenal job if their student is not feeling well of not having them come to school. And I think that's been a big reason as to why our numbers have been very, very good this year because they are paying attention to what the nurses are saying and the health aides when they call. So it's important to still have those close contacts. I can tell you some districts have kind of thrown up their hands and said, we can't do it anymore. But our nurse, Judy Leamy, is just phenomenal. She is adamant that we continue to do that as we are too. We want to make sure our kids are safe, but good question.
Thank you.
Let me just make sure I understand the math here. If I look at LECC, I'm assuming what this says is that included in the 14 is 8 due to COVID and 6 due to something else, some variety of something else's.
Which one are you?
This slide right here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Percentage out and then percentage out due to COVID.
Okay, yes.
4 is part of the 14, so presumably something around 6 was for other reasons. 8 in that building was due to COVID.
Which building were you looking at? I'm sorry.
LECC.
So LECC, if you look at January 12th, you have 33 students are quarantined, 56 total out. So that means 23 that are out for other reasons. 23 plus 33 would give you the 56.
Okay, well, maybe my point will become a little clearer. If I go to LHS, 20% of the students were out on the 12th,
Yes,
right?
yes,
5% or almost 6% of the students were out due to COVID. Therefore, something close to 14% of the students were out for non-COVID reasons. I'm just trying to make sure I understand the math.
yep, you're right on.
That's correct.
Mhm.
Really? So the non-COVID reasons almost tripled the COVID reasons at the high school that particular day.
And just so Mike doesn't have to say it, that's the COVID that you know of reasons versus the reasons that you don't know.
And I know it because somebody said positive, right?
Yes, in school, that's what we're reporting. So if you look at, let me go back to here. See the community cases, that row at LECC of 19, 24, 18. Those are the community cases that are positive. So some of those numbers are going to be out as well. So that would be included.
Again, I'm a community case because I said I have it, but I didn't get it here. I got it someplace else.
And you could also have people who were absent because they were sick, but had not necessarily taken a COVID test yet to be a positive COVID. Or they could have a flu, they could have a cold, they could, whatever. But there could be some COVID in the absence that's not related as COVID simply because they haven't taken the test yet.
I'm sure there is. And those are the parents I'm saying are doing, it's nice that that's what you want parents to do is if your student's not feeling well, make sure that you're checking
And it's hard, it's been hard for people to get tests. I mean, there's begun to be a difficulty of getting testing
Or you
done.
do a PCR test, you a couple of days.
Right.
Well, and just to reiterate, just here's some of the challenges. I had a conversation today with one of the Hamilton County Public Health employees who said, it's impossible to do contact tracing right now. We are completely overwhelmed. So the fact that Judy's still doing that is really impressive. But I heard an additional concern. Well, I got a message that my child was a close contact on Monday, and the school just told me today on Friday. Well, the math for that works that you have to go back 48 hours from the last time of contact. So if that child came home sick from school on Wednesday, and the mother decided on Thursday, I better not send them, we should get tested, and she found out on Friday that it was positive, that's how you end up telling somebody that on Monday they were exposed on Friday. Not that Judy's not doing her job and not telling people, but that's when you find that out. That's obviously one of the challenges.
it's overtaking the administrative day. I just talked to our middle school athletic director down at a basketball game before I came down here. Asked him how his day was, and he said, well, up until 1 o'clock, I was contact tracing. So, and that's just one administrator, and I know the principal was with him doing that. So it's voluminous, it's overwhelming, it's worth doing. The contact tracing, the Hamilton County Department of Health, back when it was viable, that really is who would do it. But now it's just so much that it's gone to the school districts, and I believe at Loveland, we've done a great job of doing it. I know the last couple of weeks, it has been very difficult.
And that,
Mike, can I want to just pitch in because we have the mask to stay and test to play guidelines in place, but we know that testing has been very difficult, and we know that there's been multiple exposures. How are we dealing with tests to play on children who have been exposed through extracurriculars?
Yeah, they've got a test to play, and we received, I'm gonna say 900 tests, something like that, and we did divvy them up to the different schools, and athletic department has the ability to be able to help. I don't want to speak out of turn. Mr. Coles, do you have anything to add to that?
yeah, that's exactly right. So Dr. Cook know what we have done. The contact tracing is one of our student athletes, one of our kiddos that participates in an extracurricular. In order to participate, they have to, well, they don't have to. They can choose to take the test to participate, or they can choose to sit out for 5 days. The overwhelming majority of our kids obviously take the test, and the overwhelming majority have been fine able to participate. Now, occasionally they take the test, and this happened at my house too. They take the test, asymptomatic, and comes back positive. So now they're sitting out, and we're contact tracing on that kiddo. So it does cause somewhat of a domino effect. But Mr. Broadwater has said all along, we want kids to be in school, we want kids to participate. So we have decided to participate in the test to play and deal with that domino effect to get more kids the opportunity to come back.
It's a very good point, though.
So no shock to anybody, throw some things out there though. If we know that we're behind on reporting and clearly there are community members who aren't reporting based on the numbers when we were looking at like January 12th with 14% out for non-COVID related reports. And then the number of people who have to mask once they come back with the new quarantine guidance, why would we not open the discussion of universal masking again? And especially too, because I've said to Mr. Broadwater that it's really, really taxing on the teachers to then have to police who's supposed to be masking on what day, for how long. Are they doing it with fidelity in every class? The kids that are allowed back after their 5 days. So I want to put it back on the table, the discussion.
You're talking about for a short term. You're talking about for
Yeah.
a short-term period to
Get through,
reinstate the universal masking.
I can tell you from my standpoint, I'm good with any conversation. At the end of the day, I know we all want to do what's best for kids, and that's what our parents want as well. So there's no right or wrong answer. I think we've navigated very well. There's some data out there that says Loveland's done pretty well statistically versus other districts. For me, what I have said all along is I'm an educator. I want kids in the building. I can keep kids in the building right now. Even last week, which was one of the toughest week, well, it was the toughest week throughout the whole pandemic. It was 131 students, which is a low percent of students that are out due to COVID. And I know what you're saying. There's anomalies. There are families keeping students home. I understand all of that. From my lens as an educator, when we said we're going to take the 2 weeks after the holiday, that was to make sure that we are being cautious and we are monitoring the situation. We have not changed anything that we've done up through this point. And, you know, it's tough. All these decisions are very difficult. It's, again, balancing what we're going to do for kids in the mental health realm, what we're going to do for kids in the safety realm. And as an educator, I know I can keep kids in the classroom. We are being even more cautious. We've extended it pre-K through 6 this week. And we're going to look and see if the data on Friday, if the data that I just showed, and I see the high school or the middle school is much greater than the other schools, then that tells me then we need to change something. So I like to look at data. I'm a data guy. Right now, when I look at it from the educational lens, I can't say I'm comfortable. I can say that I think we're doing okay with the policy we have right now, but it's certainly open to any discussion. There's no easy answer here, and it weighs heavily every day on what we do.
I know you put a lot of thought and time into it, and I very much appreciate that.
Thank you.
So I say, with the utmost respect, you said no right or wrong answers here, which I can agree with to some extent, but yes, our goal is to keep kids in school and focus on mental health and education, but we have the Ohio Department of Health, the ODE, American Academy of Pediatrics, the Cincinnati Children's Hospital still really advocating and pushing and recommending masks as a safety layer, as just one mitigation effort, obviously bundled with other things as well.
Right. So if I go, I'll just hop into this last slide and then, you know, maybe help out with a little conversation. The Hamilton County Superintendent update every Friday morning. I meet with all of our area superintendents, as well as Greg Kesterman, who's the director for the Hamilton County Public Health, as well as Steve Fagans, who's with the Infectious Control. He's the director of Infectious Control and also at Mercy. When we talked on Friday, I can tell you that the majority of the discussion, if not all of it, was based on hospitalizations and vaccinations. And I'm not here to say one way or the other. Families need to make the decision. That's what we've said throughout. Once this disappears, hopefully soon, we want our families to be able to make their decision for their child. But the data that came out, I feel like it's important to share. So at least I can share what I hear from 2 individuals that are pretty knowledgeable in the region. 95.2% of the hospitalizations in Region 6, which Hamilton County is a part of, are unvaccinated. And so along with the mask discussion, I think you also have to look at the other mitigations that are available to families, and we have to allow families to make decisions. Greg Kesterman, the director of Hamilton County Public Health, he is working to get vaccine percentage by zip code and by age for student population. And the reason that's important is they will relay the fact that the vaccination, again, that was the predominant conversation. And it's not me saying this is what you need to do for your family, but that was the dominating part of the conversation. Anecdotally, I can tell you, Katie, our health aide at the high school, through our contact tracing, and Judy Leamy, our older students have a pretty high rate of vaccination. And yes, we are guessing, but we're probably pretty sure because we've done a lot of contact tracing. Greg Kesterman, we have asked repeatedly to get the vaccine percentage by zip code. He has high hopes that we're going to have that soon so that we can take a look at that. Region 2, and this is a little bit of good news, Region 2, Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland, they got hit very, very early and very, very hard. The incident rates are trending down. It's an exponential curve down. Hamilton County, we're about 2 to 3 weeks behind Region 2. So the thought is probably in the next week or two that we're going to see the same. Let's hope that is true. So along with all of the mitigating factors, I think everything has to be discussed and how society is handling everything. And when you see, it's not like it was the first time through, right? Where everybody was shut down. It's now people are out and how to manage that as well. So I leave that. That's the information I was going to present. And I'm open to any conversation with the Board of Education. And proceeding forward, what I said in my newsletter is we would maintain our mitigation policy this week and look at it every Friday and see where we want to go with it. And so
Can you add to that, the discussion with the medical advisory board that you meet with on Friday?
say again.
Can you also add some details about the?
Yeah, the medical advisory board on Friday, we did not have any physicians from Children's simply because I'm going to guess they're pretty busy. We had discussion in regards with Judy Leamy, the contact tracing. I was very worried about, we do have a lag, but we're still doing it. And she is very adamant that we continue to do that. She believes it serves a purpose. And so it was Mr. Coles, myself, some other administrators, Judy Leamy, and just kind of discussing our processes. But the children's physicians were not there. I can tell you, Greg Kesterman and Dr. Fagans they were pretty busy too, but they made the time to sit down and kind of review with us what their thoughts are. That's where we were on Friday with the medical advisory board.
So, I've looked at a ton of data in the last week, and I don't want to get into too much of it tonight. But the one thing that I don't know, when you look at us across versus across the rest of the state, I think you have to kind of step back and say it's not about any one thing. Vaccination clearly has an impact on hospitalization. What kind of impact does it have on infections? At this point, I don't know. Presumably, it's tamped down a substantial number of them, but to what degree, I don't know. The mask debate continues. The social distancing, is probably widely accepted, but how is it practiced within the hallways and the lunchrooms, et cetera? It gets me, the data that we've been capturing since August has kept me wondering the whole time. Why do we see infection rates consistently, at least up until the last week? And I think I have some understanding maybe what's happened in the last week or two, but prior to the last week or so, if you looked at our infection rates, be they self-reported, whatever, by policy, meaning masked, mandatory or masked optional, they've kind of paralleled each other all the way through. And if you look at the state, it's really hard to get these various correlations. And what it leaves me to think is that there is some magic of the community that you're in, the way masks are by policy required or not, how masks are executed. CDC came out this week and shot some pretty pretty big holes in cloth masks. How do kids wear the masks, whatever kind they're wearing? What are the building configurations? What's the air quality elements of the building? You know, and on and on and on and on, right? Somehow, the mitigation protocol that we've had in place here since August, gets us an infection rate across the state of about 480 out of 600. We're 120 off the bottom, the lowest infection rates, right? Yet we're 80th or so largest district in the state. So the only conclusion I'm comfortable drawing from this is that what we're doing is working really, really, really well. If you look at it in the context of, 600 other districts that are trying to do the same thing, different ways. It goes back to what I said the last time, that the only good thing, last meeting, the only good thing I think about having school boards set policy in something like this, the only good thing is that there are so many different variations of it. It gives you dozens of laboratories to evaluate statistical results from. And again, the data says what we're doing is, kind of amongst the best in terms of results. Now, is that because of the policy or is it because of the community? I don't know for sure. My sense on the community infection rates is that, we've got nothing to write home about. We're about even with a lot of other districts.
We are.
So I think it's the combination of events, and I'm of a mind personally not to touch it because I don't know what will mess up in the process of touching it.
It's a difficult decision. As parents, a lot of us in this room have been affected by this. Those of us that have seniors in high school, they haven't had a normal year since freshman. I substituted, I ended up in an art class. And so in the art class, of course, the superintendent in the art class gives the fodder to snow days. And so the majority of the discussion was, when's our first snow day? And as we went through it, we're joking with the kids and they were awesome. It's like, well, realize if we have a snow day, this activity is not going to go. And every single kid in there said, never mind, we want to come to school. We want this activity. And so I don't think we can use a broad brushstroke without forgetting the kids involved. These kids have been affected. They've been affected, and we need to make sure that we're looking at everything we possibly can, safety, but also the mental health, like Jesse presented this evening. And so these are tough decisions. Every day is very, very difficult. But when you walk amongst the students, you can tell that they enjoy being here. They have been here. We continue to strongly urge masks. Those kids that are in 7th through 12th grade, there's nobody saying you can't wear a mask, and they can wear the mask. So it's a tough decision.
Well, I had part of this conversation last week, whenever it was, if you needed to go to universal masking for operational reasons, that's one thing. My comments a moment ago were about data and trying to be as objective as I know how to be on this. There could be another reason that drives you to universal masking. The big problem, and I think we've talked about it in here before too, is if you change the degree of mitigation, how do you know when to change the degree of mitigation back? I've said to you going through this in some of our one-on-one conversations that to me it seems ill-advised to demitigate in a situation where you've got rising case counts. I don't care, whatever your belief in masks or any other part of the mitigation is. if you've got more coming at you, doing less doesn't seem to be logical to me. So staying where you're at for sure has a case to be made for it. Then there's the discussion about, is there a case to be made for increasing levels of mitigation? And that's where the data gets in my way. It's just hard for me to find the data that actually supports doing that, especially when, we're one of, we're one of 15 districts out of 600 in the state that have this hybrid policy where we mask some and leave it optional for others. And we do really well with this. It's probably one of those where there's no right answer, no single right answer.
I think that leaves just a lot of questions. So Kevin, I appreciate all the work you put in, and I think that you did a very thorough job in looking at the numbers, and I don't doubt what you looked at. I just think that there are a lot of inferences being made, like comparing the absenteeism, that masking is or isn't working is flawed because we don't know really
Yep.
COVID versus non-COVID,
Yep.
Mask compliance. I
Right.
mean, all
Well, that-
day long, pull up your mask, especially with, I'm sure with the smaller kids.
Right.
It's really difficult.
Well, that's actually the reason that I went through the work that I did, because I think when you start to look at a population of 1.5 million kids in 600 districts, the anomalies start to get filtered out. A data set that large gives you some confidence that there's a message in there. Now, do I believe, what was Mike's number here a minute ago? Do I believe that day you had up there a moment ago?
14%.
My gut tells me that there's all kinds of anomaly in the reporting there. And I can dream of 5 different reasons that things might get reported in ways that might not be consistent with our understanding of the data, but you do it long enough. And I mean, people, there was no real difference between the buildings that had universal masking and the buildings that had optional masking from the very beginning. And even today, it's pretty much the same, although this last week, the optional buildings outpaced the required mask buildings by a percentage point or so in their infection rate. So it's the first time. That to me was statistically significant, but it was the first time that happened.
If we go back historically, how we got here, the thought was the vaccinations were available to the older kids 7 through 12. Therefore, we would not have to quarantine as many kids as long as they're vaccinated. We masked the pre-K through 6 simply because the quarantine guidelines were different and there was no vaccine available. Okay, so the vaccine became available in November. The pre-K through 6, the discussion was we'll keep them masked until they're able to get that second round of vaccination if that's what the family wanted. In the meantime, the quarantine guidelines changed such that we could keep every student in except the student that was positive, right? So then the thought was when we come back January 3rd, the families have the option to do what they feel they need to do for their children. The issue was we knew historically from last year, coming back from the holiday, it was going to be a 2-week bubble, okay? So instead of saying mask optional for the district, like a lot of districts did, we kind of sided on the side of caution and said those 2 weeks, we're going to see a bubble. Well, we saw a bubble plus. And so now we're extending that. And so we're trying to think through all of this. And there has been the discussion throughout the entire time that my goal is to keep students in school. And I get every point in regards to, I'm sure on January 12th, there were other positives that are not on that. We all know that. That's what we want, right? If our parents see that their child is ill, we want them to stay at home and then get tested and see where that goes. But just that from a historical standpoint, that's how we've got here. The thought was when the vaccination was available for the younger kids, give them a little bit of time, and then the families have choice. We've used caution up to this point with pre-K through 6 because the thought was we would get out today. But we've moved it and we'll continue to look every Friday and see what the numbers are. And so that just as a reminder, that was the thought process on how we are here. And it's worked very, very well up to this point. And
And if I could just allow perhaps this side of the table, I don't want this side of the room to be accused of listening to
Can't make
crickets.
motions, we can't second.
No, I don't like the notion that we all have to talk necessarily about this. But I think perhaps, we've heard sort of a couple of opinions.
And
And I will just say that I want to make sure that what we're hearing from Mr. Broadwater, to whom this board has given the responsibility of handling this, and I'm sure he is so happy that we have given him that responsibility. But I just want to say that I don't feel that I know that the data is as accurate as I would like it to be, but I also don't know that I can confirm what masks are doing based on the kinds of things that I'm hearing. And I wish that I could still just say, everybody stay home until this is over, because I don't know how else to make sure that every child and every parent and every teacher is safe. I mean, that's how I feel at my house. Like, just don't go out. Just don't go see anybody. Don't go do anything, because we have this new variant. We don't know if masks work. We're just all trying to do our best. And I am still at the point that I am interested in having Mr. Broadwater lead the district in this effort. But I do think, again, that we should hear from everybody who wants to speak here at the board table this evening.
I never have a problem talking, so I'm more than happy to dive right in. Eileen and Kevin, you guys are both absolutely right to flesh out all of these points of view. And Kevin, you've done more than any board member without a scientific background that I could possibly imagine to kind of try to figure out what the heck has happened across the state of Ohio. And the work that you did really, in my opinion, was incredible. I'm really impressed by how much effort you put into and what you learned and the sources that you found to kind of track down what's happened in different school districts. I don't really have a whole lot to add to that conversation. I think everybody knows very clearly my point of view, which hasn't changed really from day one. You've done a great job. You've threaded this needle as well as anybody could possibly thread a needle. And I think all of us are here to support you in the ability to keep our school district running as safely and as efficiently as possible.
One of the questions I have is just operationally, one of the things we've been talking about, thinking about the high school in particular and 7th and 8th grade with mask optional. Eileen was referencing what's the challenge that teachers are facing and wondering, okay, which kids do I need to make sure are wearing a mask, which aren't? And we know our staff are stretched really thin right now as it is. We heard about all of the challenge in covering. What are we hearing from our staff in that regard? How frustrated are they with that aspect? How helpful would it be for a 2-week period to say we're going to go universal masking in all of the buildings? Would that be helpful to them on an operational level? Is that something that we've been hearing from that they would find helpful, or is that something that they're managing and there are other concerns that they have just generally, with outages?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think some would say certainly it would help them. I think the number of contact tracing, the heavy burden last week, just correct me if I'm wrong, the heavy burden last week was elementary. That's where the majority of time was spent, and they're masked. just based on the numbers. But Jesse or Andrew or Garth, if you want to jump in.
Don't forget the clicker in case you.
Got it.
That's a great question. And honestly, just like everybody else, depends on who you ask and when you ask them, and then how they're feeling at that time. Last week, it was not even close. LES was by far the building that spent the most amount of time contact tracing. And that is a building that is mask required. The contact tracing happens whether kids are wearing masks or not. Like I said, they're wearing a mask. You still have to determine the close contacts and things of that nature. The difference would be at the high school level right now, when we do contact tracing, we have to then determine whether or not the kiddo is vaccinated and all those things, and then call them down to the office and see if they will put a mask on. The overwhelming majority put a mask on, and then based on guidance we have, they are able to stay in school. If they choose not to wear a mask, or their family chooses to not have them wear a mask, then they have to go home for the 5 days, the 10 days, based on the guidance that we receive. At the elementary level, if they're determined to be a close contact, we already know they're wearing a mask because it is required. We still make both cases. We still make contact home. We still send the follow-up letters. Hey, your kiddo is identified as a close contact. Please be mindful of. Please keep an eye out for these things. If something comes up, reach out to us and let us know what's going on. So it really just depends on what day you ask folks, when you ask them, how they're feeling, how that week went. I may have a week where I have no kids that are impacted, and then I may have a day where I have 8 kids impacted. So it's really, really hard to answer that accurately, other than just like everybody else, we're riding this wave, and how we feel is based on what is happening to us at the time. And I know that's not a stellar answer, but that is the truth.
So, and that kind of goes along with what I was talking about, though, where Jesse said with the high school, they put a mask on, you send them back to class. And then I know last time I made a comment like this, there were comments made about how I can't control my own children on social media. So, I mean, people can have fun with that again, but it's me speaking as a high school teacher and what I've experienced throughout my career, that high school students, teenagers don't always listen.
Sorry to interrupt. Are people claiming they can control their teenager?
Oh, yeah, they are.
Impressive.
So then how does that
So,
compute to
I'm just saying-
universal masking at a high school? Then are we setting
But
up
that puts
another?
a lot of burden on the teacher is what I'm saying of, okay, you now have a class of 30 and you have 2 kids that are supposed to be masked because they were called to the office and told so. The teacher is in the middle of teaching, so they're not aware of that. The kid takes the mask down on the way there. They're exposing other kids. Or the teacher has a spreadsheet they're supposed to check in the morning. You have a million other things going on. Do you remember to check? Do you remember to check it every single period? You check every
No, I was
kid?
just asking about compliance. If you institute universal masking, then are you sending students home from the high school if they don't have masks on? I'm just posing it as a possible issue, that's all.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would, our kids are awesome. They're very, they listen, they do a great job. We've got a pretty good process set up at the middle school and the high school where those students that should be wearing masks, there's a list that goes out to the teachers. Teachers are very good about checking.
This is parentally driven in that
I'm sorry?
case? This is parentally driven?
No, if they're called down and and in order to stay, they're close contacts, so in order to stay, they have to mask. So I would say,
So
Go ahead.
is there a system like, here's a note to give back to your teacher, you've left the nurse's office? Going back to Eileen's question about
Yeah.
operational management, so they don't just be like, no, I just went to the bathroom.
right. So we put out a list to the teachers. The whole staff gets a list of which students need to be masked as they go through it. And our kids are pretty good about making sure that they do that. Jesse, I don't know, or Garth, if you had anything to add.
I think the only thing I want to add is that, in talking with teachers, I would say that all teachers in general talk about how much of a hassle teaching during a pandemic is, right? That's universal. Our secondary folks, right now, the hassle would be trying to determine who is supposed to be wearing a mask and who's not based upon who's was a close contact, but they're staying in school, so they should be wearing the mask. Our teachers of our younger students, they're kind of like the mask police and saying, pull your mask up. Where is it at? Get it off the floor. Get it out of your desk. Pull it off of your eyes. You know, all those types of things. And I'm not poking fun at, I'm just saying, it is a hassle, and it is something, and it is an extra thing for every teacher everywhere. The point I want to make is that whether we are universal masking or we're not, isn't going to eliminate the quote hassle of what it might be for different teachers. That's the only point I'm going to make. I'm not saying anybody is right, anybody is wrong. I'm just saying there are different parts about this that, depending upon the age of the student and, you know, what it is that the teacher is in charge of and keeping track of, it is difficult for all of them. And I just wanted to make sure to remember that, you know, teachers in the younger buildings and teachers, if we were to make a change and we were going to be masking students at 7th and 8th grade and older, that the middle school teachers, for example, aren't necessarily being the mask police, but then they won't have to worry about who's supposed to have the mask on or off because they're staying, but then they're going to be talking about, everybody, where's your mask? Where's it at? Get it out. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a give and take. That's my only point I wanted to make sure that we were keeping in mind.
But Garth, I'm going to take the other side of this for a second. I've already kind of told you where my head's at on this, but it does seem to me, and tell me if you just agree or disagree, it does seem to me that teachers got a little bit more, has more hassle. I don't know if it's a little bit or a lot more, but a teacher has more hassle when they have a list in front of them and there are some kids that are supposed to be wearing masks and everybody else, I don't need to worry about whether they're wearing them or not. But now I have to check to see if student 1, 5, and 7 are wearing their masks or not. That does seem to be a bit more.
I would say responsibility instead of hassle, because it's a hassle. I agree, it's a hassle for all.
I guess to that, Kevin, I would say if that's the rationale, your question earlier was, when do we get out of masks? That if that's the rationale, is to make it easier operationally, it will always be easier operationally as long as these quarantine guidelines are in place. Now, we won't see the volume, but you're going to see this. I will say, first of all, thank you to the board for giving me the ability to make this decision. And it keeps me up at night, and I want to do what's best for this community and for the kids. I hope everybody knows that. It's not an easy decision. 52% of our staff live in this district, right? So on Thursday and Friday, when I got to go into every room that had a teacher in it that wasn't on a phone call with parents, I can tell you it was kind of split down the middle. Mike, when are we getting out of the mask? Mike, when are we going to mask up? Mike, what are we? So it's a pretty good microcosm of Loveland. And so there is no easy answer. I know I struggled at the beginning of this year with the younger kids and their families because they didn't have that extra layer of protection, which is called a vaccine. Whether they want to take it or not, it wasn't available. It is now available. And all the discussion that I had Friday morning with Hamilton County Health Department centered on that. That's how we get out of this. Right or wrong, that's what they're saying. I'm not the medical guy. I'm just telling you what they said. So I think sometimes these conversations, we forget the big picture is really trying to keep people safe. And we're lucky we are here this year because last year we were not. We didn't have that extra layer of protection. And so this isn't a decision I look at, a fly by night. Every minute of today, that was what our discussion was. Are we doing the right thing? So I don't take it lightly. This is good conversation. And I know our teaching staff, I guess I'm saying this because the question was about our teachers. I know they're pretty much a microcosm of this community, which means They're split.
But I'm glad you brought up the vaccination point. I think it is a huge point. I don't think we would be anywhere near where we are with our high school kids. We did, as you've said, we don't have firm data on that, but the anecdotal data from the contact tracing is we have a very high percentage of kids that are vaccinated, particularly from the hospitalization point of view. We know that the vaccinations are keeping people out of the hospital to a high degree. And so even for our younger kids, how important that is. And we want to keep emphasizing that with parents to get those vaccinations for your kids. If you've not already done so, that obviously it's a family's choice, but for their health and safety, it's certainly, we think, something that behooves them to take advantage of that opportunity. Going into this Omicron variant coming out of the Christmas break, I was very much in favor of moving to universal masking for all of the grades because of the contagiousness of this variant. I do think it's fascinating looking at the real data. We have seen an increase in infection rates in our schools, but as we look at the numbers, comparing them to the places where we've got universal masking to not, we're not seeing a great deal of variation. So I'm really conflicted at this point about, what is the best thing. We are hopeful that this is going to peak soon. So I would certainly be comfortable with saying, hey, high school kids and 7th and 8th graders, everyone's going to wear a mask for a couple of weeks, but I guess I'm not feeling as strongly about that as I was, 2 weeks ago, just from what we've seen. I do think, there's evidence that we can continue to ride through this with similar numbers in the schools and get past that. I do think it's a daily monitoring, and it's great that we've got this every day. And if something changes and suddenly we're seeing that, I think we're going to need to have that conversation again. But it certainly seems like there's general consensus around this table that we can continue where we are with the policy as it is.
And I would just add one more thing that's important to me personally, which is we're kind of forgetting that we're substituting our judgment for that of parents and their families and their children. If they thought that it was important for them to do that, they have the ability, and we encourage them to. At some point in time, I personally don't believe that I have the ability to substitute my judgment for everybody else's.
I'm wearing a mask right now. I've got some kind of a respiratory thing. I've tested negative twice for COVID. It's not COVID. But I certainly feel better being around folks, knowing that, I've got something that I'm not going to spread that. And I know there were a lot of kids, in the high school this last week, particularly because of activities that were voluntarily masking because they wanted to make sure they could all stay in, thinking about their teammates and other classmates. We're not going to, mess that opportunity up for them. So yeah, certainly we want to continue to encourage folks to use as much precaution as possible voluntarily to do that in the high school.
And just to add to that, I think that one of the reasons that we've been very successful in Loveland is exactly that. People have used good judgment. Don't send your children to school sick, please. Even if you did that in the past, this is not the time to do it.
I agree with that 100%. I think the parents have done a phenomenal job of monitoring their students. And again, we strongly encourage the masking if that's what parents feel that they need to do. I know as parents, we like to be able to make decisions, and I think there's a couple layers there, but I can also tell you that, to your point, Jonathan, if I look at the data and Thursday or Friday, we're seeing anomalies, then yeah, we got to adjust. So
Just to make clear where we are, because I don't know that we've actually gotten a consensus. We've all said, what we think. But just to reiterate, what Mr. Broadwater is saying is to keep all the mitigation protocols that we have going right now going. That includes the contact tracing, that includes masking pre-K through 6, that includes anything that we're doing in the buildings to try to keep students safe. That includes masking on transportation.
yes,
Because that's required by law. The current policy that the current setup that this board has is that Mr. Broadwater is the person who articulates this policy, these protocols for the district. and that he has the ability to make changes in those protocols as the situation would warrant, so that he could do the universal masking if the numbers showed that. He could decide when it is time to back off of the masking pre-K through 6. He could, if he were terribly gifted scientifically, come up with some other protocol that would be just wonderful that nobody knows about. But I'm sorry, I should not have gone down that path. Anyway, it is, I was trying to be sensible about what I was saying.
That's why he substitutes in art.
It is his call, and it is the board's ability to say, Mr. Broadwater, we want to talk about, and the board could have a resolution that asks for a change in the protocols that he is recommending. The board has that ability to do that. So if nothing happens at this meeting, then I'm going to ask Mr. Broadwater to restate what I just stated again before we're done, so
Sure,
that anybody who's
sure.
listening knows exactly where we are. If there was any interest in any change, there would need to be a board motion to make some sort of change.
Just to clarify on that, Mike, I didn't see that you were coming in recommending or contemplating a change in mitigation strategy. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. We would continue masking pre-K through 6. We will extend that as long as we see this. The hope is hopefully it turns down quickly like it did up in Cuyahoga County. We will continue to strongly recommend masks at grades 7 through 12, but they were not required. And then we'll continue all other mitigations such as the busing. There needs to be masking based on the federal mandate. And so we would keep the mitigation exactly the same moving forward. Looking at it, we look at it every day, but reevaluating, and I send the board updates every Monday. But if it would seem that it needs to be quicker, I would do that as well. As all of you know, I don't have a problem calling you or texting you to let you know where we are.
And on the flip side of that, if the board tonight said, we don't agree with that, Mike, we think you ought to do something different, you're not going to argue with us about it, I would imagine.
I'll argue math curriculum all day. But with this, I like to look at the data. I stare at the data. I read the data. And that's why I'm where I'm at. But by no means would I have any concerns with the Board of Education working with me for something else. That's what we do.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to ask Kathy for clarification. You said that we could ask for a resolution to make a change, meaning if I wanted to put that out there, but and if somebody seconds it, then
Yes.
we would move forward with it.
Yes, we would.
Okay, so I'd like to put on the table a resolution to make a change in favor of universal masking until just the
We
end
need
of the
to,
month.
do we need to amend the agenda first?
Yes,
Is that what you're saying?
amend the agenda,
Mr.
yes.
Dufresne is waving at me. So the first motion would be a motion to amend the agenda to include a resolution concerning, I'm presuming just masking?
Yes,
Okay. So you are making that motion.
correct.
Is there a
To amend
second?
the agenda.
To amend the agenda.
Second?
There's a second. Any discussion about amending the agenda? I think it may not be a discussable motion, but, okay,
We're just amending the agenda to entertain a motion.
to entertain a motion, yes. Okay. Mr. Dufresne, can we vote on that motion?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes,
This is just amending the agenda.
yes.
Yes.
Okay, motion carried. Now we have a motion. Now it would be appropriate for a motion, and you should state what your motion is, Mrs.
My
Washburn.
motion would be to include 7 through 12 in masking, at least for the next, I'm trying to think of when other districts, local districts are going to reevaluate. I think it was like around January 28th or so. So universal masking till the end of the month. Or I don't know if we put a date on it like that, but I know a lot of local districts, like I said, are doing that.
So your motion is
You know,
to amend Mr. Broadwater's recommendation to include masking 7 through 12 until,
It'd really have to be to establish a policy, because the current policy vests the responsibility in Mike. So this would really be to establish a policy of universal masking until a particular date and time, I think, right?
right?
It has to take away essentially the policy that's in effect.
I don't know that it does, because I know that past was the ability to do this. So I don't think we have to have another policy to say that we can do it. I think that this motion would effectively ask to change that recommendation, but I think we set up our policy to say that we have the ability to do that. Does that make sense?
It
We don't
makes
have to
sense.
have
It's not the
another-
way I remember it, but, you know, a simpler approach. Mike has already said that if the board expressed a change in direction here, you would simply agree to you do what the board wants to be done.
I would think there would have to be some formal vote so that we have an idea of what that is.
So what I was going to suggest is that the motion could be a recommendation to the superintendent to begin universal masking and have it expire January
Our
8th or some such
policy-
thing.
I know we have a sort of a motion on the floor, but it's not quite there yet.
Okay.
Our policy says that he shall also notify the Board of Education of his or her exercise of authority hereunder. So that's talking about a change, but you are notifying us of your decision at the moment so that the board can consider scheduling a meeting to review, affirm, reverse, or modify his or her decision. So we have the right within that policy.
But if there's a change.
No, it says he can institute face coverings, he can eliminate face coverings. And so he's instituting face coverings with his protocol right now.
He hasn't made a change over what our current policy is.
Well,
I
I
just wanna
read
do
it
it
as
right.
he has the authority to institute face coverings. In fact, he had said he was going to not have face coverings after January 18th, so he is continuing face coverings. And I think it's a very minor legal.
I completely agree, and I think that we should have this conversation and have a proper motion. I just want to make sure that it's done correctly, and I don't know the answer to that. My impression was that we had the ability to discuss and vote on any change that he had recommended in the policy, but not just the ability to revisit it whenever we wanted. I'm sure we have the ability to do that, but I think it would have to go back to the policy change that Kevin had mentioned instead of the way that we're trying to go about it now. I am not an expert.
The policy specifically says that the board can consider a meeting to review, affirm, reverse, or modify. So the policy's already covered whatever action this board decides to take.
It can consider a meeting to,
But in that meeting, to review, affirm, reverse, or modify.
and
It's
we,
her decision.
that was for us to call a meeting for that.
No, it means that if you call a meeting, that you can consider review, affirm, reverse, or modify.
So do you have an
So
opinion on how to?
Wait, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to,
I don't care. I just want to make sure.
I think-
I want to get to it too, but I just don't want to have a mess in our aftermath here, because I don't know how he manages
Right.
if we override him right now.
It says decision. And so currently, the way I would read it is, his current decision is not to change what he has done before, but it is still a decision about the COVID protocols.
The lack of a decision is a decision.
It's a decision not to, he's
Decide.
currently deciding not to institute universal masking.
All right, so.
And
how-
the
how
board
do you-
is asking for a motion to consider universal mask.
Well, it's more than
And
that.
Mike was saying he would like to hear a vote if he is going to.
Well, we're,
I'm saying we can't just sit here at the table and say, do this, Mike, or don't do this.
Right, right. That's what I'm saying. I think that you were.
And what Kevin was asking and what I was concerned about is if we have that as a motion without a change in policy, it doesn't meet what our current policy is. And what I've heard Mr. Giuffre says is that it does. And that's good enough for me.
so what would be the wording of the motion that we're considering right now?
I'll take a stab at it for Eileen and tell me if I'm wrong. The motion that is being proposed is to institute universal masking until the end of January at all grades in the Loveland School District. Is
And
that a fair representation?
And that supersedes the current policy.
I guess I would respectfully ask, since it's 9:05, what date would we start? It would be very difficult to get it out to the parents this evening.
Can I come back to
think
that just
we
one second?
Vote
But
for if it,
the
so then.
current policy allows the superintendent to make the call.
Mhm.
He can make a different call every single day, the way it's
Right.
worded right now. So to me, this is superseding, we're telling him what to do for a specified period of time. And I think the intent of the policy is to arrest from him that independent judgment. Which is, I mean, if we want to do that, we can go down that
According
path.
to the way I read the policy, that resolution would be asking to modify the current decision of the superintendent, and it falls within the policy. It does not require changing the policy. It is, I realize that the policy says we can schedule a meeting within 72 hours. Seems rather strange that we would be at a meeting and we would say, okay, we're going to have a meeting in 72 hours to talk about this. We're-
But that's still what it says to me. And I understand it seems strange, but to go back, and I think that if we decided to vote on this, it would merely be a recommendation to Mike to change the policy rather than an order.
Again, not
Change.
changing our board policy,
His,
changing
the mask
his
policy for those.
COVID
Correct.
protocols.
Yeah.
Yes.
Correct.
Well, I'm, okay, this is going to get circular in a hurry. I think the current policy allows us, we can make a recommendation, which it wouldn't affect the policy in any way, shape, or form. From a practical perspective, we could make a recommendation to Mike to go to universal masking effective whatever day is practical for as long as the board would desire. And from a practical perspective, Mike is going to go, if that's what the Board of Education wants, I may not agree with it, but it's what I'll do.
Right.
Because if I don't, then we're going to call a meeting in 72 hours and change
Yes.
it.
Yeah, I
But
think,
it also, sir, I'm sorry, Jonathan, it also gives him the ability to say, okay, I hear your recommendation, but it's not practical for me to do that tomorrow, so I'm going to institute that as soon as I can.
yeah,
That
so,
makes sense.
so it seems like the practical recommendation would be to ask him to add 7th to 12th
Right.
to the current policy.
And your statement, Dr. Svechnow, was recommend masking 7 through 12, so however you said that.
All students.
Recommend the masking of all students. That's what the resolution would be before the board. A resolution, a motion to recommend that the superintendent mask 7 through 12.
I think that's clean from a policy perspective.
Yes.
I'm not saying I
Right.
support the
I understand. We
recommendation
haven't gotten
yet,
there yet.
but
We
I think
have
that's
just
the way to
now
word what
gotten
is
Mrs.
contemplated.
Washburn's
Yeah,
motion.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, is there a second?
Wait. Restate that one more time.
Mrs. Washburn's motion, I believe, is
Yes.
to recommend that the superintendent institute masking 7 through 12, or masking of all students, and I would assume all staff,
Yep.
pre-K through 12,
As soon as possible until
January 28th.
I don't know that we have to, the question I would have would be about the end date. I don't know that
I
we
was
have to
just-
set an end date right now, because right now Mike is making the decision when the end date is for the other,
Everything, yes.
other
Okay.
children as well.
All
So,
right.
I agree with that. I was going to
So,
throw that out.
motion to recommend masking 7 through 12 to start as soon as possible. That's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Well, I mean, I have a concern with that motion, only that it gives him no guidance as to what our expectations are for how he's supposed to stop. He's already said, I don't plan to change. We've asked him to change, but we haven't given him a time or a reason to stop the change.
And there's no meeting between now and the end date of 1:30.
But we could have a meeting within 72 hours if you did.
Thank you for
We've
that
established
opportunity.
that.
If I were to say something, I would agree. I think having an end date helps. If this is the direction the board
I
wants.
tried that, but I was,
Yeah. The question is, right now, we don't have an end date for the K through sixth grade masking. We had a suggested time frame. We've now said we need to push that back. We're going to wait and see where, the variant is at that, in the next couple of weeks. So, my thought would be that you would then pair those things together. When we feel that it's appropriate to end for K to 6, we'd also be ending for 7 to 12. If we were to do this.
well, we have a meeting February 1st.
So there is a motion on the floor.
Yes, there is, and we're,
And do you mind just restating it one more time so we're all super clear about exactly
can
what
you
that
restate
motion
what
is?
you said? When you said you thought you had a motion? I'm just trying to, yes, you've got something, Mr. Giuffre? That'd be good.
Institute the universal masking for all grades as soon as possible through January 31st.
I thought we were taking the date off.
Well, but over at this side, they suggested having a date on there. I'm sorry, that's
The motion actually was without a date.
the motion, the first motion was.
The original motion was out of date. Superintendent has stated he would find it helpful to have a date.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, there's a motion on the floor right now that, to my understanding, reads, the board is recommending that the superintendent institutes a policy in which there is universal masking at Loveland City Schools, period.
Yes.
Mike, I interrupted you before. You were talking about timing to begin. If the board approved this motion, gave you the recommendation, when would you contemplate instituting universal masking?
Yeah, I think you get the communication out tomorrow, that it would start the following day.
We don't have a scheduled meeting until the 15th, is that correct?
No, we have a work session on the 1st.
We do, okay.
I think so.
So you would start before the weekend if we handed you that recommendation.
Right.
So February 1st, if we were going to add a date, that would be,
Which is a Tuesday.
to be evaluated on the 1st if we were ready to.
But again, we wouldn't have to do anything because we've merely made the recommendation at an end, at least with this current motion.
And with the
Right.
current policy, Mike could stop it on his own.
When he
Yep.
felt it was appropriate.
Yep.
That's the beauty of the current policy.
Right.
Mhm.
So I'm not an anti-mask person. I think I've supported masks every time we've had them here, I think. I just can't find the data here to push me to change a mitigation strategy that seems to be working really well. And I'm confident that if Mike saw operational or other reasons to change the policy, he both has the ability to do that instantaneously, and I think he's of a mind to do what he needs to do to keep everybody safe here and to keep the kids in class. So I don't personally feel the need to advise him to change what he's doing. So I would not be in support of it.
And I can add to that. As I think I said earlier, you've done a tremendous job threading a needle on a very difficult subject. We've watched you pivot very quickly as recently as last week in order to keep our schools functioning. I have trust that you'll continue to do the same thing, and I don't see any reason to hinder your ability to do that.
Thank you.
And I think that, Mike, I think you know by me making a motion for this resolution that I agree with everything Eric said, that you've done a tremendous job and you've kept kids in school. And it just comes down to me having a really hard time with not following what all of these medical institutions are saying. And I get that the guidance as far related to specific masks has changed, but they're still saying having those mitigation efforts and all of the different tiers in place are helpful.
Yeah, I mean.
But I do
and
appreciate you very
I
much.
appreciate all that. My main concern would be the end game. That would be my concern. If we're questioning here this evening, then, I don't think we want to be here again. I think we want to be unison in the decision there as well. And so that would be my concern.
I just find it really unfortunate that schools are placed in the position of trying to decide what the science says, what the experts say, trying to decide what's best. I mean, none of us were prepared for this. And it's not a question where there's a right or a wrong. And we all know that, our parents also have those same issues. They're trying to decide what's right and wrong for their students. And, so I just think,
On that point, I would urge our parents to, if they have a concern, to right now to take the fact that our own data from August certainly suggests that masks made a difference in the lower grades. I don't know how much of a difference, but the facts are the facts, that the infection rates have been relatively equal between the two sets of buildings. And if you have added concern now, it's a good time to rethink your personal family masking decision. You don't have to stay the way you've been on that one. So,
all right, any other discussion? Are we ready for a vote? Mr. Giuffre?
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eiler,
Yes.
Dr. Schwechnow,
No.
Mr. Doherty,
no,
and Dr. Lorenz.
Thanks a lot, guys.
The burdens of being the president.
No, it's not the burden. It's, it's the burden of making a decision for our kids. And I just have to vote no. I still believe that Mr. Broadwater has helped us through this, and I think he's going to continue to do so. And if numbers change pretty quickly, he'll do that masking, but I
Motion
have to vote no. Motion fails.
And Eileen, I just want to say, I appreciate you bringing this to the fore because it's conversations that we need.
Absolutely.
All right. Anything else in your updates, Mr. Broadwater? Anything else
Like I
going
said,
on in
I-
Loveland schools besides COVID?
I would like to say thank you to the many individuals in the PTA that provided donuts for our staff today. I was able to enjoy a strawberry donut, which I should not have had for lunch. But I know they're going to be at our transportation department tomorrow morning. That was what they had scheduled. So, but thanks to everybody pitching in, the community, and helping out our staff. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Anything else? Then it's time to move on in our agenda, do a little more work. The next item on the agenda is under the business manager's purview, and it would be a motion to approve a contract with CMTA for all engineering design work required to replace 49 rooftop HVAC units at Loveland Primary and Loveland Elementary Schools.
So moved.
Dr. Swetchenow moved. Is there a second?
second.
Mr. Doherty seconded. Mr. Ames, is there a report that you would like to get? I mean, I know that there is a report that appeared, am I correct, under administrator reports? Back in just for folks who are looking in the agenda, that's where your report appeared. Any report from the facilities committee? Any discussion about this item?
I can have a brief discussion. John obviously is much better at it than I am. We met with members of the planning commission, Mr. Ames, myself, with three different engineering groups, and interviewed them all about their ability to carry off this project and help us to improve the ventilation and replace equipment that's at the end of its lifespan and the two buildings on Loveland Madeira Road. I point out, and John can echo this, we have 49 different rooftop units servicing that school, which is by far not the most efficient way to deliver air handling schools. And so this will be a pretty complex project, which I feel comfortable that we have a good handle on. You've obviously done things like this for years. But in particular, we had members of the community and the planning commission with different expertise that were present, that were able to point out to the engineering firms the importance of air handling, air purification, and ventilation, especially in this era of COVID, but also for respiratory illnesses going forwards, and how important it is to make sure that we're providing good quality air for the kids. It would be great to have a brand new building and not have to jury rig 50 different units together to provide that, but we'll figure it out.
To that point, what's the expected lifespan of these units?
The units that are currently on there were put on in 2003 and 2004 for the primary elementary school. Typically, a rooftop unit such as this has a 15 to 20-year lifespan, just depending upon how well you keep it up. The units still function, but they're just becoming much more difficult to maintain, and they are from vintage 2000 ASHRAE, that is the American Society for Heating and Air Conditioning. And so it was built upon that model of HVAC. So we need to move them into a much more efficient, much cleaner method of cleaning the air for the children. And it is just that time. So these will be good for at least 15 years.
And is there any energy savings that comes along with the newer technology?
There will most likely be some, won't be enough to really shock us, but hopefully it will keep the cost of gas and electric that's going up dramatically in the next 3 to 4 years from rising too quickly. So we're just slowing down the expenditures.
So the reason I was asking is, I do believe I'll be starting an email campaign by saying this, but I do believe that the community at some point in the foreseeable future will say one or both of those buildings, it's just time to do something
Yes.
with them, right?
Yes.
I don't know when that's going to be, but let's say it's well within 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Kevin saying the
Yes.
community will come to that decision. The payback on this investment from an energy perspective will buy us a few more years.
At most, yes.
At most. And then, it'll be some time before we get to that decision. It'll take some time to build when we get to that point. So if you're thinking that, we're putting money into an old building that we're going to get rid of somewhere down the road, or it's going to keep us from getting rid of an old building somewhere sooner down the road, I think there's some mitigations offsetting that.
And I mean, we could keep the building comfortable, heat and cool wise, but we are not providing the ventilation that is expected in the current
Well, you've kept
environment.
You've kept the buildings reasonably effective for what, 60 some odd years now, right?
Yes.
So I'm pretty sure you can keep them going for another decade or two. we're in this situation where we've got these old buildings that I think a lot of reasons, maybe not really strong financial reasons, but a lot of reasons to eventually move beyond them. But we're also at a point where you've got to do something about the mechanicals, and you've been advising us for months about air quality from a student health perspective. So it's kind of, you're in a pinch point.
If I may, back in 92, when we built the high school, we said, oh, let's not look at building, and Dr. Lorenzo remembers, let's not spend too much money on this elementary and primary because we'll probably replace them in 5 to 10 years. And then we said the same thing in 2000 when we built this facility. So we would like to think they would go away, but it's been since 92 since we've talked about
I
it.
used to have pre-World War II buildings that we just couldn't find a way to get out of. You know, all kinds of
Function.
reasons not to have them, but a really hard decision to make to get away from them. But in any event, I think you got to keep moving forward. We're not as a community, I believe, at a point of making a building decision, you know, anytime real soon.
And the reality, as John pointed out, is that, you know, these units have a 15 to 20-year lifespan. We're starting to put more money into repairing them at the end of you can't even get another 3 or 4 years out of them reliably.
Right.
Isn't there an opportunity at this point for some money that has to do with some COVID funding that is available because they are air quality? So we have an opportunity to provide for whatever life those buildings have for the air quality for the students who are there.
This was one of the purposes for ESSER 3, and clearly being able to provide social distancing by use of our modulars and better improving air quality by purchasing these HVAC units was exactly what those funds were intended to do. So we're using them for the purpose for which they were intended.
And this is,
So we have identified the $1 million within the budget to, great.
It's been approved by the Department of Education.
And we're simply approving the 81,000 for the engineering cost in this resolution, but we have the actual cost for the work to be done already identified. Good.
I will be coming back to you probably with the lead time for these units. And we all know how the supply chain is working right now. These units are on a national contract. So we will be, and it's already been bid. So we will purchase the units as a district. I've done that a number of times so that I will not pay the X% markup at a contractor purchase them. So we will go ahead and order the units, get them under manufacture, and then we will come back and send out a bid for contractors to do the work. So it's going to be a two-step process.
how does the cost split between the two buildings? Because one's got dozens of units and the other one's more centralized, right?
The one that has dozens, they're all smaller units, and the other building that has more centralized has larger units. So the cost is probably going to be pretty close to an even split. Neither one of them are easy jobs to do. There's a lot of work, a lot of equipment to put on the roof, a lot of equipment to take off. So it's going to be a very busy summer if the units do even arrive. We're hoping if we order them in February, we will get them here on time. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? All right.
So this is approving the engineering work. When did you say you'd have the, essentially the $1 million?
No, it'll be probably $600,000 to $700,000 for equipment, and then the balance will be for installation. So the equipment will come next, and then the installation contract.
What kind of timeframes though? And
For,
when will we see those?
I think the equipment will probably be late February, and I would imagine that the contractors would be March. That gives them time to gear up for the project.
And if we don't use ESSER now for this, when does ESSER go away for this?
I believe it's 2020.
So another year or another year and a half, so we lose the opportunity to do anything.
And we have enough identified opportunities to spend it in other ways, but this works out perfectly. And again, one of the gifts of the COVID pandemic was getting money that we weren't expecting.
So we can make the buildings better, take some pressure off and save a little bit of utility cost along the way. You'd love for the buildings to be newer, more modern, et cetera, but they're not.
And John, I just want to say this for the meeting purposes. You know this already because I beat you over the head with it. Make sure that the engineering firms know that, our interest in making sure that we have as good air quality as possible and that we're doing everything we can at this opportunity to improve that.
Yes.
And they heard that from us.
Oh, they heard it loud and clear.
15 air exchanges an hour.
Something like that.
Are we going to get that high? What are we going to get to, you think?
I'm not going to venture a guess.
Wouldn't
but you'll tell
15
us.
air exchanges an hour just blow those little kids around?
Well, something like 8 would be pretty good, right?
Mhm. Yes.
We get to 8,
But every time you increase that number, the utility costs go up dramatically because you're heating a lot more.
Just to give you an idea, in the operating room, it's 40.
is it really?
Yeah.
Can we educate kids in the operating room when you're not using it? All right, any other questions? All right, Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that?
Dr. Schweitzer,
Yes.
Mr. Daugherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes,
Ms. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
motion carried.
Good work, and thank you for this.
All right, we move to the treasurer section. There is we'll go ahead with a motion, and then if Mr. Giuffre has additional report, there is a motion that the board accept the financial reports for November and December 2021 as recommended by the treasurer.
So moved.
And I'll second that. So it's a motion by Dr. Swetchnow, and I'll second it. You will note on the agenda that there is now the ability to find other detailed, there has always been the ability to find detailed financial information. As I understand, that may be changing over time as we adapt some of our reports and what is there, but this is what the board is accepting this evening or approving this evening.
And incidentally, the Auditor of State's audit for the fiscal 2021 fiscal year has been released today, and that is also on the site. I put the link to the site, but it's the treasurer's webpage. So we've added the annual financial information statement for our debt, which is required by the SEC. We've added the independent auditor's report, and I will just say that auditors don't typically know the difference between a sentence and a paragraph. So the only sentence that matters in the report is, in our opinion, of financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. That's what you want. It's an unmodified opinion, which doesn't sound very glamorous, but that's what you want. And there is a letter from the auditor on page 2, which actually it's the first page because it's not the cover page, basically saying that there is a scope of project currently underway, but it does not impact this audit, and it would be reflected in future audit reports, but it is not reflected in this one. So that's just ongoing work that they're doing in the district, but good news. And then there will be additional information on the treasurer's webpage, and it will be restructured to make it a little easier on the eyes, but right now there's a substantial amount of information out there, and monthly reports are following. We'll give everything from an overview of where we are in the current period to very analytical information that Mr. Daugherty would love to delve into. So,
Rob, am I right in thinking that this is the word change that we talked about?
Yes.
This is accepted versus approved
versus
now?
approved. Mr. Stedronsky said that that would be perfectly fine. And then we did scope it down so that it has the reconciliation in the financial position and then also the investment report. And in the investment report, Dr. Schweitzer pointed out, I think it was just as the Bengals were kicking off, that
I do my best thinking.
that they have included the Star Ohio
Yeah,
number, and I've asked them to take that out. It does not belong in our portfolio, even though they're the third-party trustee. So that will be removed from the January report. We will not have Star Ohio represented because, yeah, it's confusing, so. And I appreciate you pointing that out because it was easy to get done.
Good catch.
Bengals bring out the best in me.
I was looking at that and wondering about it, but I didn't ask about it. But
Okay. Anything else on these financial? So the board accepts the report from the treasurer's office. Okay, Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that?
Dr. Schwetznow,
Yes.
Dr. Lewins,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eiler,
Yes.
and Mr. Doherty.
yes,
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you. We move into Director of Human Resources items. Mr. Carlier, would it be better to have a report from you before we enter into each of these individuals? Or do you want to do them as we go through them? Yeah, we'll just go through them one by one. Okay, so the first one is a motion to, it's missing a word there, moved and seconded by to approve new supplemental positions for the LEA agreement. So I'll make that motion.
Second.
Dr. Swett now seconded. So first comment on that, and then we can have board discussion.
Yes, I just want to bring up the fact that there is a supplemental committee. It's a 7-person committee, 3 LEA members and 3 administrators, and I'm the person who facilitates the group as the 7th member. The job of that group is to discuss and talk about current supplementals that we have, and then any supplementals that we need to kind of like bring off because we don't have student participation in those. And then folks are able to kind of like apply for new supplementals to be added. So this group meets 4 times a year. This is the recommendation coming from the group at this particular point. And then you see the 3 things listed. The 3 things listed here, which in these 3 things are a unified track coach. And unified track is it's our special needs students that are participate in Special Olympics for them to be able to have a program to participate in. The next one is a winter track coach. That is a boys and girls program. And the third one is a LMS site supervisor, which is basically would be a $100 stipend for 10 different events at the max for the year.
Garth, do you just mind telling us what level 4, 7, and 9 mean?
Yes, that just means when you take a look at the end of the contract where the supplemental positions are listed, it's just there are different levels and they have different amounts of money depending upon what sport that is. And so these are the particular levels where these would fall under.
And you may have said this, and I may have missed it. The unified track and the winter track, those are some events that have been happening on a less formal level. There have been people working with students on this,
Yes,
but this is the first that we have
correct.
codified it in a
Yeah.
supplemental where there's pay attached to it.
That's part of our kind of our process is to talk about not just having an idea and then hoping that students are wanting to be participating in that particular event or sport or activity. Both of those are things that have been happening. Specifically, the unified track, there used to be a stipend that was paid from the Special Olympics to the person who was the advisor or the coach for that. That has been removed in the past. We continue to have the folks who work with our individuals, and we felt like year after year since that stipend went away, that it was an appropriate thing for us to then pay the individual to run that. Winter track is the same thing. We've been having winter track for a couple of years, and we felt like it was now the time as it's an established sport that OHSAA has as a sport. We've had students participating in it, and so we feel like it's now the time to be adding that to the list.
Any other questions or discussion?
Just one more thing. Has this already happened? I mean, winter track is transitioning to spring track now. Is this for this year?
Yeah, it's a good point. The winter track is already ongoing, and the coach knows that there's a possibility that they won't be paid for it. And unified track is in the spring, so that's upcoming. And then these 10 events, maximum of 10 events, working with the athletic director at the middle school, we are unsure if we're going to be able to use all 10 for this particular year, but next year be able to utilize all 10. So it would be 100 per event. So depending upon if we have the need for it this year to use all that money or not.
Can we go ahead and vote? Okay, Mr. Giuffre, can we vote?
Dr. Lorenz?
Yes.
Dr. Schweitzer?
Yes.
Reverend Adler? Yes. And Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Motion carried. We just note that Mrs. Washburn left the table for a moment. She will return. The next item is to approve an updated job description for Assistant Treasurer, and I'll make that motion.
Second.
And Dr. Swetchenow seconded. Can you talk a little bit about that, Mr. Carler?
Would you like me to?
Sure. I'm going to go ahead and let Mr. Giuffre talk about this.
Thank you.
So our, in all effect, Assistant Treasurer, Lindsay Massey, is a very highly revered individual in the treasurer community. And when I arrived here, I thought that she was already had that title. And so as I was going through job descriptions with my staff for each position, to make sure that primary, secondary, tertiary responsibilities were covered in the job description, I discovered that the job description that Lindsay Massey had been working under said fiscal coordinator, but when I found the assistant treasurer job description, it was identical. She's been doing the work, and even within that job description, her job description as it currently exists, it says supervisory responsibilities, manages non-supervisory employees. So it's not just a manner of managing processes. And so I modified this to slightly change that in most instances, instead of saying treasurer, that she uploads, she balances, she leads, she's responsible for, because that's what she's been doing. And she served 5 treasurers, and one of the best in business I've ever worked with. And so I thought it was appropriate for her to be named in that position and be compensated for the work that she's been doing all along. So that was the purpose of creating the job description. I thought it already existed, but now it exists in the format that is was approved and consistent with, I think, the 2018 changeover in job descriptions.
One thing I would like to add, and I know Rob doesn't do this, but the job that Rob has done, taking a look at his department, looking at things that are inefficient, making changes to make things more efficient. And it doesn't just have to do with his staff, but it really has to do with all processes that happen in the treasurer's department. And I know he's staring at me right now saying, Garth, just be quiet. But I just want everybody here to know that he is taking an in-depth look at everything that his department does and trying to make sure that the things that are best for our community and our district, for everything that happens to do with the treasurer's department, he is taking a look at. And I have confidence in the decisions that he's making are going to be the best for our school district.
Thank you, Garth. I do believe that Lindsay Massey's leadership with regards to all of that is critically important, because she is, she's extraordinarily she is the keel of our office, and the change managements that are going to go on is going to be part of her learning and growing into this role, as well as what she already is able to do. So we're very excited about it.
One of the things I've been seeing as you work through this review and this evolution of the treasurer's group is a growth in the information that is publicly and easily available on the treasurer's page now. And it seems to me that you really are taking seriously this opportunity for the treasurer's page to become a resource for the community, a knowledge base for the community. And I think that that's the right thing to do. Improve transparency, improve the flow of information, improve the understanding of the financial aspects of the district by the community members that someday will have to deal with funding challenges. Not today, but someday.
Thank you. And I don't think anybody has more of a sense of urgency than I do to get that site populated, so we can provide that to our community. Thank you very much.
Any questions, comments? Mr. Dufresne, can we vote on that?
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Dr. Schwetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
and Mr. Darty.
Yes.
Motion carried. The next motion is a motion to approve the resolutions of Director of Human Resources, including resignations and employment of certified, classified, homebound substitute and supplemental positions for the 2021-2022 school year. Your motion.
So moved.
Second.
I heard Mr. Doherty and then Mrs. Washburn second. Mr. Collier, report on that.
Yes, just wanted to make sure that when this information was first sent to you guys, there, if you look in the administrative copy, there are some things that are in yellow that were new since the last time that we spoke. So just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware of the things that are noted in yellow. And other than that, there isn't, any other discussion other than if you guys have questions.
Any questions or comments? I apologize for not seeing this before. Is Steve Scarborough's name spelled correctly? It may be, it may not. I don't know if it's.
It is spelled correctly.
Okay, it's not Scarborough.
Scarborough. Yep.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
He's a great guy, by the way. I've worked with him for 20 years. I'm super excited for him
I-
to be able
I
to
do
begin
see
the next
A list of
chapter in his life.
retirements and resignations there, though, so things to be.
Two of my children have had him. He is pretty fantastic.
Yep, I agree.
And hopefully we will have a chance to honor retirees and things like that this year at some point.
Hoping so.
Let's hope so.
Thank you. Okay, any questions or comments? All right, can we vote on that?
Mr. Darty,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes,
and Dr. Schwetchenow.
Yes.
motion carried. Then there is a motion to approve the conclusion of the employment agreement with Loveland High School Assistant Principal. And that is Rebecca Griffin. Is there a motion to approve that?
Second.
Mrs. Washburn moved, Mr. Doherty seconded. And that is, Mr. Carlier, do you have a brief explanation
Yeah.
of that?
What I can tell you is that the resignation effective date is for February 13th. And just that for personal reasons, Ms. Griffin is stepping away from her role. And collectively together, we have worked together to make sure that we're doing the right thing by her, but also the folks at the high school and our students that we serve.
Thank you. Questions?
Is there any sort of plan for like succession, or is it something that's gonna, I mean, obviously would be posted, but
Yeah, as soon as, very quickly, we are going to be trying to find the high school some assistants for the rest of this year. And then, of course, a more permanent, person for that role for next school year.
we wish her the best in her future endeavors.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Dufresne?
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Darty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes,
Dr. Schwetchenow,
Yes.
and Reverend Eilert.
Yes.
motion carried. Then the final item is the motion to approve the 2022-2023 calendar. For motion?
So moved.
Reverend Eilert moved, and I'll second. And this is the second reading of this. We did
Yes.
have the first reading of this.
Feels like it's been a year in the making. But yes, this is our second reading and excited to be able to get this out to folks in an official manner. So staff and community members and parents can start making plans around our school calendar.
Right. And based on, I have had heard of at least 2 requests of when does school start? So people will be happy to see this as soon as it can be uploaded to the
Absolutely.
website. I will also note that the board did receive an email concerning the calendar. I believe it came in just after 5 o'clock this evening. I had a chance to really read the email, but I will forward that. But just so folks know in the community, the calendar is worked out through collaboration with the district administration, but also with the certified and classified unions and how we work on that calendar. And so it's a process that happens. And so we were already into this process, But I will send you that information so that you will have it as you move into the process for the 2023-2024 school year.
Yes, because believe it or not, we're going to be starting to talk about that here very quickly. So we're not, so we can get this, the calendar for the next year out in a much earlier fashion. This is unusual for us to have it be coming out this late. I'm going to get back on that cycle to where it's much earlier in the year.
And there is a process where it is available for the, I mean, it is mandated by law that the community be able to see it. And that's why there's a first and a second reading.
And Garth, I'm going to bring up two things, and one of them I know is a repeat, if not both of them. Just to be clear for everybody, we've had conversations in the past about Veterans Day being a holiday and Veterans Day being a day in school. And the calendar coming up, Veterans Day is still a holiday.
Correct. So
One of the
there would
reasons
be
that is
no,
our contractual obligations with the staff.
that's correct. There was going to be some additional lifting that we were going to have to do. Part of our OPSing agreement has some specific language about holidays in there. And at this particular time, we felt like it wasn't the right move. In addition to that, there were also some other changes to the calendar from our more traditional calendar. And in hindsight, I think maybe trying to tackle so many things at once, we actually ended up in a better spot than what our original plan was. I'm actually glad that we are, for right now, leaving that piece, the Veterans Day piece, alone the way that it has been here in Loveland, which would be a day off of school. And then we can talk about that for these future years, if that's something we want to tackle. In the end, I'm actually, even though it was, lots of work and lots of conversations and lots of meetings talking about all the changes that we made, I feel like this was the most appropriate action for us right now.
And then thank you, and I agree. I know you've done a lot of work on that. The second one is the same concern that I brought up this year, which is I understand in the past, while some of the schools on Loveland Madeira were off on election day because there was split first grade between LECC, which is closed as a polling place, and the classes down at the primary school. I'm not sure that I understand or agree with the fact that the PK through 4 should be off on election day when those buildings aren't affected.
Yeah, so what we talked about and discussed about that was that historically in the past, it needed to be that way because when our first grade was split, it was that some first grade students were having school that day and other first grade students weren't. It is something that Mr. Broadwater and I talked about this year because LECC is a polling place, but LPS and ES is not currently a polling place. In terms of the calendar, we wanted to make sure that if it was going to stay that way, that people were notified and knew. If we're going to make a change to that, we would then be talking about amending that calendar piece to decrease the number of grades that would be off for that day because of election day. So we didn't want to do one before the other. We wanted to go ahead and leave it in. And then if we do decide that we're going to have school at the PSES campus on that day, then we would amend. The other issue is that that's historically a day for some of our younger grades that they have parent-teacher conferences during the day. And there is also some discussion about there's still a need for that because at that grade level, all of our parents are coming in for conferences, where some of our older grades, less time for conferences are needed because not every parent comes. So that's a discussion that we're going to have, and Mr. Broadwater and I are going to work with those particular buildings to see what our plan is going to be for that next year.
Anything else? All right, Mr. Giuffre, can we vote?
Yes.
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 Motion carried.
I do have one follow-up. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that the donuts today weren't necessarily just the PTA. It was a group of individuals that came together that were just volunteers doing it. Maybe some of those folks do belong to a PTA, but it wasn't universally a PTA. I just want to make sure to, and when anybody's feelings to be hurt, the folks who brought the donuts and stuff today, it's just a group of our parent volunteers, which was really great. And we,
Thanks for
Thank you.
clarifying.
They're hoping to do it again too.
Yeah, they are.
yeah, that our staff loves stuff like that. So I want to make sure that we had it right.
Thank
Hope
you.
they caught that at, okay.
Who's keeping track of the donuts that Mike had?
I hope that folks caught that at the beginning when I talked about communication, how we had received communication from the community. So we
Yes.
do know that it was a community effort, and
Great.
we're really appreciative.
Thank you.
Mike did go hiking this weekend, so a 2 or 3 donate morning is
I
over.
earned, I think I earned a cream filled, but I stayed off the cream filled.
Okay, so then it would be appropriate for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Dr. Schwartz moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, I was going to say, for a minute there, I thought that we were going to have to stay. Mr. Doherty seconded. Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that?
Dr. Schweitzer,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Ms. Washburn,
Yes.
Dr. Eilert, Dr. Lorenz.
Yes. Meeting is adjourned at 9:55.